has set out, we are committed to 3.5% of defence as part of 5% being spent on national security by 2035, 3% in the next Parliament, and I will continue to make the case for increased defence spending and more capabilities for our armed forces.
Cameron Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wanted to put on record my respect for the members for Royal Marsh and Conisbrough and for Birmingham Selly-Oak. Both served in the roles they relinquished last week with the sincerity and integrity those roles demanded. Each should be commended for having put the needs of our country before their own this past week, citing the government's underwhelming commitment to defence investment. Of course, the rest of us will just have to take their word for it. I also have great respect for the Secretary of State for Defence incumbent. I know he's with the King this week and unable to explain what it is about the government's approach that inspires him but not his predecessor. In his absence, I wonder if the Minister could explain to us when we will see the defence investment plan that he has now been left to front.
I thank him for his question. It's the same answers I've been given for quite some time. The Defence Investment Plan will be published ahead of the NATO summit in only a few weeks' time. But can I join him in his words of thanks to the previous Defence Secretary and also the previous Minister for the Armed Forces, having two people with a passion for defence serving alongside has been a real privilege for me. I share that passion and commitment for the new Defence Secretary. We've got a job to get this right. We know it's important, we know it matters, and that's why we're continuing to increase defence spending. A debate that says how quickly we're increasing that defence spending and what more can we do is a debate that I welcome. But let's also make sure we're talking about what we're spending it on and make sure within that debate it's not just kit and equipment, it's our people as well that get a mention.
So we are talking this afternoon of spending, but modern warfare, like warfare since time immemorial, depends on the bravery of our fighting men and our fighting women. But we also need nimble and effective industrial base, for we used to have arrows, then there were bullets and shells, now drones and tech. So how can we be best prepared for the next war and support the SMEs in places such as Suffolk?
Well, can I thank him for his question? He is an assiduous raiser of the people in terms of tech. But I visited Suffolk, and it is an area where I've seen SMEs do really well. Indeed, I've been to a drone manufacturing company from Ukraine set up in that part of the world. We need to learn the lessons from Ukraine, and that means more autonomy, more drones, more joined up way of thinking, a change in the way we fight, if only because the way that Russia has fought in Ukraine shows that some of the doctrine that we've traditionally worked on, that we inherited from the Conservatives, about what's the difference between the close and the deep, how does artillery and drones work together, how can you hold ground and take it, have changed fundamentally. That's why we're setting out in the Defence Investment Plan the implementation of the SDR that starts that process that gets us to a more lethal force.
Julian.
I know the Minister accepts that I've criticised successive governments for not spending anything like the 4.5% that Margaret Thatcher used to spend on defence at the height of the Cold War throughout the 1980s. But does he accept that the service chiefs have made an objective assessment of the government's own strategic defence review and have arrived at the conclusion that the sum of £28 billion is necessary to implement it over, I believe, a 4-year period? If he accepts that, how can he possibly go along with an offer from the Treasury of less than half the total needed?
Minister.
Well, I have a lot of time for the right honourable gentleman, and he and I were on different sides of the chamber but made the case for increased defence spending in the last Parliament, and I'm glad that he is with me in arguing for increased defence spending in this Parliament as well. We'll continue to make the case for that and look at how we can deliver those increased capabilities.
Brenda St George.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At the beginning of the month, I attended the NATO Parliamentary Assembly Spring Assembly in Lithuania with representatives of other NATO and other allies, including Ukraine. The Labour Party, Mr. Speaker, you'll be aware the Labour Party has a strong tradition going back to Ernest Bevin in maintaining a strong and effective defence for our nation, both within NATO and independently. So after 14 failed Tory years, and considering other NATO countries are already well ahead of us in relation to the proportion of their GDP they're spending on defence, what will the Minister be doing to ensure our armed forces receive the transformation they require to face modern-day threats with an industrial sector to support so that we do not betray Labour's strong defence traditions.
Minister.
Can I thank him and the work that he does with the NATO Parliamentary Assembly? It's important that we not just have a Labour government that has a NATO-first approach, but we have parliamentarians from all parties that make the case for UK leadership. We are working with a number of our NATO allies currently, both in terms of the coalition of the willing activity with Ukraine, but also the UK-led mission in the Strait of Hormuz that will help reopen and demine it in the future, to work with our NATO friends to make sure we're increasing deterrence and, where possible, moving from interoperability to interchangeability to make sure the kit and equipment that we have is shared. Now, that increases warfighting ability, it increases lethality, it smooths supply chains, and it poses a greater deterrent option against Russia, which is what we're going to continue doing. We will work with our NATO friends not only on joint procurement projects, but also how we can operate, train and deploy more together.
Brendan O'Hara.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just when the high north and the Arctic is emerging as one of the world's most important strategic hotspots, we witnessed a major UK government department disintegrate before our eyes when the Secretary of State, because of the parsimony of the Treasury, resigned, taking with him the Armed Forces Minister and a junior minister. How does he think that the Prime Minister will convince our NATO allies that he is capable of defending that strategically important Greenland-Iceland-UK gap when he cannot even convince his own colleagues that he can?
Minister.
Well, can I thank him for his question? It's not normal that the SNP have a very strong pro-defence line, but it is, I guess perhaps welcome, and if this is a change of heart from the Scottish nationalists, I would broadly welcome that. He will have seen the action over the weekend against Russia's Shadow Fleet. He will also know of the work that we do out of Scotland, both in terms of Faslane with the submarine operating base, but also RAF Lossiemouth, for instance, with the P-8 maritime patrol aircraft and the quick reaction response aircraft that we have from there, ensuring that we work with, in particular, our Norwegian allies, but our allies across the High North. The Defence Investment Plan only increases the investment in that part of the world because it is an area where we're seeing increased risk from Russia. We're seeing an increased number of Russian boats ships in our waters, and we know the threats to our underseas cable and our airspace is real and increasing. And I hope that we can find a new cross-party consensus with the SNP, which I hope will start with the SNP government funding the second DTEC in Scotland to give our young people the skills they need.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm proud that Blackpool and Fowl College in my constituency has been selected as one of the 5 defence technical excellent colleges which my honourable friend have seen, and is part of a major national investment in skills. But given the significant opportunities this brings to Blackpool and its potential, can the Minister confirm that if this defence investment plan will supply and support young people with the careers it needs in the defence industry?
It was a real privilege to be in Blackpool for the announcement of the 5 English DTECs. It is an opportunity, I think, for the very first time for defence to invest in skills of our young people. And he will have seen not only a Labour government investing in further education with the 5 DTECs in England, 1 in Wales, hopefully 2 in Scotland, but he will also have seen the last week our announcement of a funding for more further education colleges and universities to provide defence and defence-adjacent skills, because to deliver on the increased defence spending we are making, we're going to need to see more investment in skills, especially between 16 and 19-year-olds, graduates, and an area that's talked about less, which is retraining mid-careers, which I know Blackpool has a real focus on, especially working with BAE Systems on the Typhoons out of Salisbury and Wharton.
Dame Harriet Baldwin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. On the 1st of July, the Trade Minister is slapping a 50% tariff on steel from many of our allies, much of which goes into the aerospace and defence supply chain that will affect the cost of his defence investment plan. So can he urgently review those tariffs and their impact on our defence spending? Because I'm sure the Minister will agree that he wants to get the most bang for his money in terms of funding defence.
Minister.
Can I thank her for her question? She's right in arguing that we need more investment in our steel industry. It's why the Defence Industrial Strategy identified steel as one of the sectors we need to invest more in. It's also why, under this government, we're seeing more investment in, say, Sheffield's Forge Masters, which has a specialist steel-making capability that we use in certain parts of defence. I'm very happy if she wants to write to me about the particular issue that she raises.
Mr. Speaker, there's been a lot of talk about additional money needed for defence for a very long time. Can I just ask the Minister, what would he do with more money that he can't do now?
Minister.
I thank my friend for his question. Look, I want to see more defence spending, but the way that we have drafted the defence investment plan is as a scalable proposition. So with more defence spending, we would see more drones, more investment in our stockpile. We'll see a faster recovery of personnel numbers. We'll see more investment in autonomy and the hybrid navy. And we'll see more investment in housing and the regeneration of our estates, in particular, the regeneration of our ports and our naval refit facilities. That would make such a big difference towards availability. The DIP is deliberately designed to be a scalable plan to reflect the spending that we receive.
So Desmond Sway.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister told us that the former Secretary of State had asked him to stay. Had he not been so asked, would he have resigned too?
Yes.
How much persuasion did it take?
Yes.
Here's a good one. I have to say, as someone who comes from a defence family, who's believe the opposition's size. Let's talk about those people who have a proud military family that they come from. I'm proud that my old man was a submariner. I'm proud of his service. I represent a military city. It has taken years upon years to get a Labour government. I respect the decision that my former ministerial colleagues made. I decided to stay. I was encouraged to stay. There's a good reason for doing so. And given the activities that we've seen over the weekend, I can say that I'm proud to be continuing to work alongside some incredibly brave and professional people in our armed forces to keep our nation safe.
Adam Jogi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I acknowledge the service of my right honourable friend, the member for Romarsh, and those who worked in his office, and I'm very sorry to see them go. Mr. Speaker, I thank the Minister for his response, but I have to say to him, this is one heck of a mess. I know how difficult it can be to work with the Treasury, and I know there's much we have to do, but my constituents want to know that we'll do whatever we must to keep them safe. So when I go home on Thursday, how can I tell them that we will?
Minister.
Can I thank him for his question? Look, we're already increasing defence spending. We're already renewing our forces. We're already fixing defence housing. We're already increasing the pay of our armed forces. We're already tackling the toxic culture that existed in our armed forces to make working in defence good for every single person. But I want to see that go faster, go further. With more defence spending, we can deliver more and greater deterrence and greater lethality. A debate around increasing defence spending is a welcome one for me as someone who feels passionate about defence. I have a lot of time for the former Defence Secretary and the former Armed Forces Minister and the arguments that they have made. I want to see more defence spending. The new Defence Secretary wants to get the best deal for our armed forces. And I know the Prime Minister and the Chancellor equally are planning to increase defence spending. A debate that says how fast, by when and spending on what is a debate that I welcome.
Sir Jeremy Hunt.
Mr. Speaker, I recognise the Minister has a difficult job to do today, but has he not noticed that even though Labour has 3 times more MPs, there have been nearly twice as many Conservatives here today? And is that not because his colleagues are voting with their feet and saying that the former Defence Secretary was right and cannot defend the indefensible?
Minister.
Can I thank the right honourable member for his question? As he will know if he was in more defence questions, I like defence scrutiny. I like defence debates. And as far as I'm concerned, Mr. Speaker, let's everyone go round again, because the more questions on defence, especially on capabilities, not timing, not what happened last week, but on the capabilities we need to invest in, is a debate that I welcome.
Andrew Lewin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The past is a story of the Conservatives hollowing out our defence. The present is a story of this government spending more than they did at any time over 14 years. But my question is about the future. Our brave allies in Ukraine have revolutionised warfare. They might want to listen to this. It's serious. They have shown the effectiveness of drone technology. They are turning the tables on the Russians. In the Defence Investment Plan, how can we learn from our allies in Ukraine?
Minister.
Can I thank him for his question? I know the Conservatives don't like hearing about their hollowing out of the armed forces. That is what we inherited. That's what we're trying to put right. And if they had spent the level of defence spending they now argue for when they were in power only 2 years ago, perhaps we wouldn't have such a big challenge today. I don't like it when they groan about our armed forces. I don't think it's respectful enough for what we need. However, but for his question about here, when we look at Ukraine, we can see not only the drone technology, we can see the way that's changing with an electronic warfare environment. We're supporting that. We're buying 120,000 drones this year for our friends in Ukraine, utilising cutting-edge British technology, some brilliant British companies working with brilliant Ukrainian companies. And we're not only looking at small drones, we're not just looking at the EW environment, we're not just looking at radars and command and control systems. What I'm seeing from Ukraine is how we build those all together. The former Minister for the Armed Forces set out very clearly from his perspective how we can learn from Ukraine. The Strategic Defence Review sets out how we're learning from Ukraine, and the Defence Investment Plan sets out how we will buy more drone technology and learn there. But more investment going into defence is one that I welcome, and the more that we can learn from Ukraine, the greater deterrent capability we have to stop Putin looking over the NATO boundary and thinking he can have a go at a Baltic state or somewhere along the eastern flank or even the United Kingdom.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This year, global arms expenditure will be around $3 trillion. Every country that is raising expenditure is doing so through taxation, through cuts or through debt. In drawing up this defence spending strategy, what consideration did his department or the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office give to a strategy for multilateral negotiations, for the détente, for peace in the future, as a way of everybody benefiting from a peace dividend of less being spent on arms rather than more?
Of all the people that I wasn't expecting to be arguing for more defence spending, I wasn't certain the right one gentleman would be doing so. But let me say very clearly to him, NATO is the guarantor of much of our security. We are proud to have a NATO-first policy in this government, working with our NATO allies across the Euro-Atlantic area to deter Russian aggression. We can see what happens when deterrence fails. We can look at our friends in Ukraine to see Russian aggression. We can see the attacks on civilian infrastructure, including overnight, an attack that we correctly condemn for the brutality and illegality of targeting civilian infrastructure. We can see what happens when deterrence fails. That's why we're investing more in defence to increase our deterrence. We're doing so alongside our allies in order to prevent conflict in the future. This is a really important task. It's the first duty of the government. I want to see more defence spending because I don't want to see the United Kingdom in a war like our friends in Ukraine are fighting now. That's why we must continue to support our friends in Ukraine for as long as it takes and invest in the new kit and capabilities that our forces need to deter aggression. And that's what this Labour government will do.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was asked at a Falklands War Veterans Conference in Poole last week to reassure our serving personnel that the funding is there for the deterrence we need to keep this nation safe. Now, this Labour government has already given our forces a pay rise, invested in defence housing, increased defence spending, and increased retention and recruitment in the army. Now, by contrast, because there's been a lot of groaning on the other side of the House, I want to give a specific. Between 2010 and 2024, the size of our army shrank by 30%. Under the last Conservative government. So can the Minister confirm there will be a fully funded plan to deliver this government's vision for defence? And can he give my constituents that reassurance that we will always keep this nation safe?
Can I thank my more friend for her question? And can I also say thank you to all those people who served in the Falklands, both in the 1982 conflict, because yesterday was, I think, the 42nd anniversary of the Liberation Day, something that is celebrated not just across the United Kingdom, but also in the Falkland Islands. It's important that we remember the sacrifice of those people who went to the South Atlantic and never came back. And that's precisely, for me, one of the reasons why I want to see more defence investment, why I want to see us have the deterrent capability. Because coming from a military family, with members of my family that have served across the forces, I know that when they go away, there's always a question mark about whether they will come home. And it is precisely because of that that drives me and my passion to say we need more defence spending, we need to spend it on kit and equipment that keeps our people safe, that provides deterrence and war-fighting capability. And that is exactly what this Labour government is doing, investing in our people, investing in our forces. Of course I want to see more defence spending. That's an argument that we're making and will continue to do so with the Defence Investment Plan published before the NATO summit.
Adega.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In response to the question from my right honourable friend, the former Defence Secretary, I welcome the Minister's response and his reaffirmation of the Government's commitment to all the recommendations in the Strategic Defence Review. Given that, at the current time, how many of those 62 recommendations have the funding they need fully agreed and committed by the Treasury?
Thank you. So we support all 62 recommendations of the SDR. They're all in progress currently. The Defence Investment Plan sets out how we will deliver our equipment, our personnel and our estates for the next 10 years. That will deliver that. I want to see more defence investment. The argument that was made by my former colleagues is one that is powerful. I do want to see more defence spending, and that is an argument that, if we're having that debate across the House, is one that I welcome.
Response.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his answers. Can I also take this opportunity to welcome my honourable and gallant friend from Leighton and Wanstead to his rightful place on the front bench. His experience in the armed forces will be really useful for this government moving forward, and he also knows my constituency of Harlow very well, which is particularly useful. I'm sure you will all agree. As my honourable friend at the member for Bournemouth has stolen my thunder, I was going to say that actually our armed forces, the most important part of our armed forces are our people, our soldiers, our naval personnel, our sailors and also other staff. So can the Minister reassure me that he will continue to champion our armed forces and ensure they have all they need to do their jobs and keep us all safe?
Mr. Speaker, I can confirm that we will be continuing to invest in our people. I think it was the late 80s was the last time that we had a defence review that didn't cut the size of the British Army. In the Strategic Defence Review that was published under this Labour government, we announced that we will increase the size of the British Army to 76,000. We know that the Army strength fell considerably under the Conservatives. We know that we've seen a retention and recruitment crisis under the Conservatives for our forces. It is precisely that we've got after with the biggest pay rise for armed forces, action on housing and childcare, and I welcome my new colleagues, the new Minister for Veterans and People, but can I say I'm also really proud of the new Minister for the Armed Forces, another veteran serving in a key role, and both of them will do a good job for our nation.
In his excoriating resignation letter, the genuinely honourable and genuinely gallant member for Selly Oak made it very clear that he was leaving not just because he considered the DIP to be underfunded, but more particularly because it planned to spend the money on the wrong things, preparing to fight the last war, not the war to come. He was right, wasn't he?
Yeah. Look, I have a lot of time for the former Defence Secretary and the former Armed Forces Minister. I agree with much of the argument that they have made around the importance of increasing defence spending. It's the reason why I've set out continuously from the dispatch box today that I want to see more defence spending and I want to see it directed at British companies. I want to see us prepare to deter the next conflict. And so to do that, we need to invest more in drones. That's what the Defence Investment Plan will set out. But as I've set out also to a question from a colleague on my side of the House, the Defence Investment Plan is a deliberately scalable document that can reflect an increasing defence budget. That's what we're projecting over the coming decade, delivering our commitment to 3.5% on core defence by 2035. Spending more on the new capabilities does mean, though, retiring old capabilities. It does mean doing something that the armed forces have not done for a very long time, and that means discarding some of that kit and equipment that's been around for many, many decades and investing in newer technologies. Now, that's a difficult argument for ministers to make. It's a difficult argument for those people that are attached to old equipment in particular. But when we have armour that's been in service since before the Vietnam War, where we have ships that are decades past their decommissioning date, we do need to be honest about the need to retire old equipment and buy new equipment. The hybrid Navy is just one example of what we'll be setting out in the Defence Investment Plan.
Sarah Poachin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have been told from a reliable source that our Prime Minister, in stark contrast to all other previous modern-day Prime Ministers, has never visited our Special Forces headquarters in Hereford. Is this a reflection of how low down his priorities list defence is?
That's a fool question.
I have to say, there's two things I would say to the honourable member. I know she's relatively new in this House, but the first thing I will say is we don't comment on special forces. It's a really important rule. We neither confirm nor deny activities nor visits to any Special Forces location. We do that deliberately because any question that helps define who is where, what they are doing, is a benefit to our adversaries. Now, I appreciate she's looking for a gotcha question with that, but let me take her back to the important things. We don't comment on Special Forces. What I have seen from our Prime Minister and the former Defence Secretary is them meeting the crews of our ballistic submarines when they return on zero day after many, many months under the sea. I've seen them support the brilliant service of armed forces personnel, but I'm afraid you will not get me nor any other government minister commenting on armed forces. And may I suggest to her that next time she thinks carefully about asking questions like that again.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I was away with NATO PA last week, and I thought I understood why the former Secretary of State for Defence had resigned. Standing here today, I think it's really unknown why he resigned, according to the Minister. But, Mr. Speaker, where the Minister is right, is talking about making sure that naval procurement doesn't go through the problems that it had in the past, one of the consequences being in power with Liberal Democrats. But in terms of procuring ships, there are shipyards, Mr. Speaker, who are worried about whether they can maintain their workforces because without the dip, they don't know. And I am concerned to read that the Type 83 destroyer may be postponed as well. So may I ask the Minister, directly, yes or no, is all of the plans that are currently in place for capital ships going to remain, or is that up for debate as well?
Can I thank him for his question? And he will know from his time in the Ministry of Defence and on the NATO PA that getting procurement right and fixing a broken procurement system that we inherited is important. We've already made a number of steps to get there. He will recall, I think, from the last urgent question on this topic last week that I answered around the Type 83. And so if he wants to look back on that debate, he'll get his answer to that one there. But let me say to him very clearly, we inherited an equipment plan that was overcommitted and unsuitable to the challenges that we now face. That's one of the reasons why we're looking to invest more in autonomy, more in hybrid and uncrewed systems, and especially for the Royal Navy, as he mentions, the importance of air defence, looking at how uncrewed systems can sail alongside crewed systems, providing the air defence bubble, learning the lessons from our friends in Ukraine and recent activities in the Middle East and Cyprus will be an important part, and he'll be able to recognise that immediately when he reads the DIP when it's published.
Vicky Slade.
Mr. Speaker, Martin from Wimborne contacted me at the weekend to share his suggestion to fund the Defence Investment Plan. He thinks that the Lib Dem idea of issuing defence bonds is a really sensible one, and has told me that in his view there are many people with money in cash ISAs who might be tempted to invest if the investment was taken out of their inheritance tax liability. So will the Minister confirm whether discussions are happening about innovative ways to access the capital needed to ensure that the DIP can be fully funded?
Minister.
Can I thank her for her question? And I think it was Martin, his interest in how we increase defence spending. She will know from the debates that we've had in this chamber that it's not just the defence investment plan that we're working on currently. We're also looking at how, through a defence finance and investment strategy, working with our defence advisory group for city professionals, that we can look at accessing new forms of capital, both patient, sovereign, and a whole range of capital options. I know that she and her party are keen on the war bonds option. I may say I'm happy looking at the detailed analysis if her party has any on it. But what I would also say is it's not just investing in core defence that we need investment in, it's investing in the supply chain in particular. And that's especially true of those small SMEs with huge growth potential as to how can we ensure that they can compete for contracts. So it's one of the reasons we're looking at new ways of procuring, the commercial ex-procurement model, learning lessons from Task Force Kindred for Ukraine procurement. We're bringing those into mainstream UK Armed Forces procurement to speed it up, which means more SMEs will be able to benefit from it, but more capital injection into defence, both from the government, as we're planning, but also from private sources is a good course.
No, Shastrihurst.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Last week, the former Defence Secretary said that the Prime Minister was unable and the Chancellor was unwilling to fund the resources needed to tackle the threats facing our nation. Does the Minister agree with that assessment, and if not, why not?
Minister.
I've seen the Defence Secretary, the previous Defence Secretary, make the case for defence spending. I've seen the Prime Minister and the Chancellor increase defence spending since Labour came to office. I know that there is a very strong case that to meet the moment we need to further increase defence spending. That's why the new Defence Secretary has been speaking both to the Prime Minister and to cross-government colleagues about how best we can deliver that and deliver a DIP that will increase our warfighting capability, end the hollowing out and the absence of funding in the equipment plan. About 30% of the equipment plan we inherited was unfunded from the Conservatives. Lots of work to do, but we'll publish it before the NATO summit.
Tim Farron.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The sluggish and unambitious delivery of the Defence Investment Plan is not the only threat to our security. Given that we have Russian ships threatening our cables and such like, would he agree with me that the fact that the United Kingdom is reliant for its food supply, 45% of it, on imports, that is no longer an economic convenience, it is a national security liability? And will he recognise that England is now the only country in the UK and the only country in Europe that doesn't directly support its farmers to produce food? Isn't that a threat to our national security too?
Yeah.
Minister.
Well, when I held the Shadow Environment brief, he and I were in many debates where I made the case strongly that food security is national security. It's something that really matters. But he will also know about, he mentions cables as well, that we're investing in not only the operations that RFA Proteus, but also HMS Stirling Castle can undertake to support our undersea infrastructure. We need to continue to support those items, and he will see more in the Defence Investment Plan. DEFRA issues cover food security here, but I do agree with him that food security is national security.
Dr. Keir Mullen.
Madam Deputy Speaker, Madam Speaker, the former Defence Secretary knows what's in the Defence Investment Plan, thought it was inadequate and resigned as a result. I'm sure the Minister wouldn't be so shameless and disrespectful to this House to spend an hour defending that plan if he himself hasn't seen it in full. So a very easy question for the Minister, yes or no, has he seen the Defence Investment Plan in full?
Minister.
Yes, I've been involved with doing it. Let me be very clear. To answer his question in full, I know his front bench want to shout at me, but let them listen just for a moment. The Defence Investment Plan is a good, scalable plan that provides the capabilities. He's asking me have I seen it. I've just replied yes. He needs to listen to the answer. Yes, I have seen it. I've been involved with writing it. The plan itself is a good plan. The debate here is about the funding that goes into it. And I'm up for a debate that says, how do we increase defence spending? Because I want to see more capabilities. I want to see defence housing improve faster. I want to see more support and recovery of the strength of our armed forces. That's precisely what the Defence Investment Plan will set out. And making the case for more funding to go into that is a good one.
Ayub Khan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. If there's anything the last few months has taught us, it's that military might is no guarantee of security. Trump deployed the full force of its military, dropping bombs and killing thousands in Iran. And it's brought nothing but mounting debt and a far worse deal than the one Obama struck without firing a single missile. In addition, Trump and Netanyahu wiped more than $2 trillion from the global economy and brought energy price hikes thought to push 100,000 Brits out of work. Now, of course, that does not mean we abrogate our responsibilities and don't support our armed forces in personnel and the deterrence that we need. But unlike the opposition leader, does the Minister agree that careful diplomacy and tackling the cost of living crisis, especially for the most vulnerable, does more to bring security than any bomb?
Try and keep it short, Minister.
Yep. Can I recommend to the honourable gentleman that he reads the new defence diplomacy strategy that we published a few months ago to deliver on what he's just asked me?
Rebecca.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Members of 42 Commando Royal Marines, led by Commanding Officer Tom Quinn, were a key part of the seizure of the Russian Shadow Fleet vessel yesterday morning. Now, it's clear that our Royal Marines will always deliver for this country. They are world class, and I've had the privilege of seeing them in action at their home in Bickley Barracks in my constituency. But their ability to succeed can only be sustained if we invest in our defence and prepare for the wars of tomorrow. The former Armed Forces Minister, a former Royal Marine himself, said in his resignation letter, "We're still purchasing capability suitable for the last war, whilst our adversaries arm for the next one." Does the Minister agree?
Can I thank her? As a fellow Plymouth MP, I was exceedingly proud of the Royal Marines from 4-2 Commando in Plymouth for participating in the action. If you were to look at 4-7 Commando, another Royal Marines unit based in Plymouth, she will be able to see some of the new capabilities that we've bought to support them. The Kraken K3 Scouts, for instance, will continue giving our Royal Marines the capabilities that they have, because the Royal Marines have a bright future ahead of them and superb professionalism, as we've seen from the weekend.
Robin Swan.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Minister said that the Defence Investment Plan will be published following a line-by-line review. It's obvious that the previous Secretary of State resigned because he could no longer review it downwards any further because of the actions of the Treasury. He's also said it's scalable. What assurances can the Minister give that it's scalable upwards in regards to spend and not downwards, as the Treasury has already said that they're unable and unwilling to fund it further?
So we're already increasing defence spending. We will continue to increase defence spending. The Defence Investment Plan is designed to be scalable to match that increased defence spending. The question is what profile that increase should have. I'm always going to be arguing for more defence spending, but we're increasing defence spending, and that's something that I want to see more of.
Kevin. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And the Business Secretary on the weekend said a lot of time and effort had gone into the Defence Investment Plan, but when pushed, he hadn't read it. The Defence Secretary and his colleague have read it and they resigned. Now, he said he'd read it in full. Why did he decide not to resign when his two colleagues in the department did resign? Minister.
I answered that question in my early remarks.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I first of all put on record my thanks to the former Secretary of State and the Forces Minister for their principled stand in relation to defence spending. Over the weekend, one of the government ministers on the Laura Kuenssberg show referred to extra defence funding. The Minister, the new Secretary of State, which I welcome to his place, I wish him well, like the honourable and gallant member that he is. He also, I understand, is committed to extra funding. So as a DUP MP representing a region with a proud historic military tradition and a thriving defence sector and manufacturing base, what immediate assurances can the Minister give to the thousands of skilled defence, aerospace and maritime workers across Northern Ireland whose cutting-edge capabilities are vital to reinforcing our sovereign defence industrial base, and we must never compromise the territorial integrity.
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I would point the honourable gentleman to not just the £1.6 billion contract that we've placed with Thales in Belfast for their LMM missile, supporting our friends in Ukraine, but the increasing investment that we're working with Thales on to support our Middle Eastern friends, and the £50 million Northern Ireland Defence Growth Deal, that's especially supporting the SMEs in Northern Ireland to be able to access more of that increasing defence spending. But I want to see more defence spending in Northern Ireland, as I want to see more defence spending across the United Kingdom.
The Minister will know that we've been stalling on signing the full international contract for GCAP now since last year. And in April, we signed the interim funding contract for Edgewing, which was £686 million. That runs out in just 2 weeks' time. Now, yesterday, the Prime Minister obviously met with Sanae Takaichi, the Japanese Prime Minister, and Japan being one of the partners in GCAP. Can he confirm that there's an agreement that he has signed the full international contract, and can he guarantee that funding will be in place before the money runs out at the end of June?
Minister.
It's unusual for him not to be on the money in terms of the questions, but as the media reports from yesterday's, from the weekend's meeting make clear, we'll be signing the full international contract by the end of the month. We're committed to GCAP.
Final question, Mike Wood.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Minister was clear that the previous Defence Secretary asked him to remain in post. So will he be equally clear and tell us exactly what in the letter sent by the previous Defence Secretary to the Prime Minister about the Defence Investment Plan last Thursday he disagrees with?
Minister.
There's lots that I agree with the former Defence Secretary, and there's lots that he and I have worked together for a very long time on this. I respect his decision and those of the former Armed Forces Minister. I'm staying to get this done, to deliver a Defence Investment Plan, and that's why I'm going to continue working with our brand new Defence Secretary to get a good deal for defence and to make sure that we are supporting our armed forces.
That is the end of the question on the Defence Investment Plan. I'll give the front benches a moment or two to shuffle over. I ask colleagues to be seated. Before we come to the statements, I must place on record Mr. Speaker's disappointment that the Prime Minister has chosen Downing Street over this House to make the important announcement about banning under-16s from social media. The Prime Minister's very own rulebook states that important policy announcements should be made in the first instance in this House when it is sitting. His approach this morning is symptomatic of a pattern of disrespect
for this House from number 10. The Government said it will update the Ministerial Code on this point, and I urge them to get on with it. In the meantime, they must stick with the rules as they are set out. Mr. Speaker wishes to thank the Secretary of State, who is a shining example of a minister taking the code seriously on this matter and not briefing out her statement before she has come to the House. Secretary of State.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Today marks a defining moment for our children and future generations as we lay the foundations for a new settlement for the online world to ensure children have the best start in life, to give them freedom to be children again, and so we put power back into parents' hands. Up and down the country, parents are grappling with social media. What their children are seeing, how much screen time they should have, who they are communicating with, and if they are safe. Many children love connecting and interacting on social media, but others struggle with their mental health, concentration, and self-esteem. And the police, children's charities, and far too many tragically bereaved pet families have seen for themselves the serious risks and harm social media brings. While these concerns are widely shared, there are different, often strongly held views about the best way forward. That is why we launched our consultation on growing up in the online world to make sure everyone's voices were heard. The response has been overwhelming. We've had over 116,000 replies, including 54,000 from parents and 14,000 from children. We've heard from charities, teachers' organisations, the police and medical professionals, and from countless members of Parliament too. Not only the Science and Technology and Education Select Committees, but individual members, including the honourable members for Plymouth Moor View, Croydon East, Cowdenbeath and Kirkcaldy, Dunfermline and Dollar, and so many more besides. The progress report we published today sets out lots of different perspectives, but overwhelmingly our consultation shows parents and children are concerned about what they're being exposed to online. Harmful content that's completely inappropriate for their age, abuse and exploitation. They're worried about the impact on sleep, school, children's physical health and their emotional well-being too. Above all, parents are crying out for change. 9 out of 10 parents who responded to the consultation told us they want an outright ban on social media, as did 3/4 in our large-scale representative survey, and 113,000 parents who signed Daisy and Joe's smartphone-free childhood petition. Keeping children safe online has been my top priority since day one in this job. I've listened to calls, especially from bereaved families, that we need to act as quickly as possible. So today I can announce our first steps, with more to come next month. And I can confirm we will ban social media companies providing their services to under-16s. To give greater protection.
Order. Was there clapping in the chamber? There should not be clapping in the chamber or in the gallery. No doubt the doorkeepers will remove people if they need to. Minister.
And we are doing this to give greater protections to children, greater clarity for parents and carers, and to set a new social norm for future generations. My intention is to lay regulations on a ban and have a vote on it by the end of this year, with the ban coming into effect early 2027. We plan to use the same model as Australia, covering user-to-user platforms that allow users to post material alongside algorithms. So our ban will include platforms like Snapchat, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook and X. Because we want to make sure we don't include educational services, e-commerce platforms or music streaming, there will be a narrowly defined list of exemptions, which we will of course keep under review. Madam Deputy Speaker, I have also listened to parents, to civil society and to many MPs in this House, including the members for Putney, Lowestoft, Congleton and Newcastle upon Tyne, about the need to go further. So I can today announce our first steps in restricting a wider range of features and functions that create risks for young people. Because it can open the door to vile child abuse, we will ban live streaming for under-16s across all platforms. And we will ban communication with strangers, including in gaming, to stop paedophiles meeting and grooming children. And Madam Deputy Speaker, we are not stopping there. AI chatbots were a top concern of parents who responded to our consultation, particularly those that mimic intimate relationships and exploit vulnerabilities. The Children's Commissioner and my honourable friends, the members for Aylesbury and Milton Keynes Central, have also raised this issue. So today, Britain is becoming the first country in the world to ban chatbots that offer sexualised content to under-18s. And we will restrict this functionality on general-purpose chatbots too. We know there are also really serious concerns about other AI chatbots like therapy apps. But I recognise that some of these may have benefits, so I am working closely with the Department of Health and others to assess the evidence, and I will come back to the House on this issue and wider measures on AI chatbots in a further statement next month. Madam Deputy Speaker, we also want to address concerns about a cliff edge when you turn 16, an age when many young people should be especially focused on their futures and on exams. So I can today announce live streaming and stranger communication, including in gaming, will be switched off by default for 16 and 17-year-olds. I am also strongly minded to bring in default overnight curfews and breaks in infinite scrolling for 16 and 17-year-olds. And I will set out further details once our pilot schemes are finished in my statement next July, in July. Madam Deputy Speaker, I know that not everybody supports a ban, and I have listened really carefully to those concerns, and I want to take each in turn. First, we've seen in Australia that many children will try and succeed in getting around a ban. I think that is inevitable when social media has been such an integral part of their lives. So we will introduce more highly effective age assurance measures to better support compliance, and I have asked Ofcom to share proposals on this within months. However, I want to be clear to parents and to members of this House that our ban is as much about helping future generations and resetting social norms in future as it is about young people today. Second, people worry that a ban would push children onto riskier, less regulated sites, and this is something I really take extremely seriously. So I have had a long conversation with and written to Ofcom and the new chair to stress once again that enforcement of both the Online Safety Act and our new ban must be a top priority. That they must focus rigorously on this, including riskier sites, and to ask them for an urgent review of whether Ofcom has the right capabilities in place. I have also asked them to publish a clear enforcement strategy and an annual report to Parliament on how this strategy is progressing. Third, we must prepare children for the online world, which will inevitably be part of their lives. Now, many schools are already doing this, but from September this year, every pupil across England will learn about social media in the classroom, including about AI and how to spot deepfakes. My department has also produced new advice for parents on how to talk to children about the online world, called You Won't Know If You Don't Ask. So schools and parents together preparing children for the future. And last but by no means least, the NSPCC and the honourable members for Kettering, Hertford and Stortford and North West Cambridgeshire have all rightly raised the importance of ensuring all young people can access information, trusted support and exciting activities, especially if they're no longer spending so much time online. And we are delivering on this too. The Education Secretary and Cultural Secretary are expanding what's on offer in every school and beyond the classroom, including in after-school clubs, in the holidays and at weekends, by support for a wide range of enrichment activities, like art, music, sport, cooking, camping and museum visits. Things that were once only available for those who can afford them, now for every pupil in England. And in stark contrast to members opposite, who cut youth services by 75%, we are investing £500 million in our Youth Matters National Youth Strategy, so children from all walks of life, wherever they live, can access youth services, sport and the arts. Madam Deputy Speaker, my driving force, the reason I came into politics, has always been and will always be to give every child from every background the best possible start in life, because that's how they and our country succeed. Today, we take a decisive step towards creating a safer, healthier life for our children and future generations, giving children their childhood back. I am clear-eyed about all the challenges social media brings for adults as well as for children, and that technology constantly changes. So today's announcement is not one and done or the end of the story. There is still much more to do. But this is a landmark day. A day when we stand with parents, charities, bereaved families and all those who have campaigned for change. This is your moment. It's a day when we take power away from the tech giants who have had countless opportunities to keep children safe and put it back in parents' hands. A day when we give our children the freedom to be children again, so they have the best possible start in life. And I commend this statement to the House.
I call the Shadow Secretary, Lopez.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you also to the Secretary of State for someone infamous for her impatience. I think waiting for the Prime Minister to opine on something she does genuinely care about must have been as frustrating for her as it has been for us. Today, the Prime Minister announced as his shot at a legacy something 6 months ago that he said he was personally opposed to, a ban on social media for under-16s, and we can be grateful that he got there in the end. But the victory is not his. Thanks must go to some of the gutsier Labour backbenchers, and we heard them all cited today, the Leader of the Opposition, the Shadow Education Secretary, and in particular my noble friend Lord Nash for his dogged determination in pursuing his amendments. But above all, we must thank those parents who took the senseless tragedies that befell their families and turned their pain into a legacy that will benefit so many children. They have conducted themselves with dignity and grace, and many sit today in the gallery to see the results of their courage. The Prime Minister's about turn tells many stories, Madam Deputy Speaker. If this was a man with views, his position could have been laid out at the start of the year, with the consultation used as a chance to polish the policy. As it is, officials' heads have been left spinning trying to retrofit details to this Damascene conversion. The Prime Minister likes to make a virtue of process, but he has used process in this case as a tool to avoid doing what so many in this chamber said was not only inevitable, but right and entirely necessary. We've had votes. The Prime Minister instructed his troops 3 times to vote against a ban. We've had debates. The Prime Minister wouldn't give a view. But lo, a career-critical by-election comes along, and on realising that protecting kids is not just popular but vital, the Prime Minister has finally found his voice. With Makerfield going to the polls on Thursday, Madam Deputy Speaker, perhaps we should use the next couple of days to maximum effect and try to extract his opinions on funding defence, cutting welfare, getting cheap energy, because this country has been waiting for leadership for too long. As Conservatives, we believe in the ultimate responsibility of parents over their children, but they face huge challenges in keeping their children safe online. It's not simply a matter of denying them a phone or a computer. There are many good uses of tech that children and young people should be free to explore, but the onus is on us as adults to create a positive place for their exploration. Instead, activity that would never be tolerated in the real world has been normalised, monetised and algorithmically amplified to kids' detriment. The Online Safety Act was a step forward, but we better understand now that this is not just what children see, it is how social media works. The success of this policy, however, will depend heavily on its implementation, and it's an announcement that still begs many questions. So I asked the Secretary of State, what additional resource is she giving to Ofcom? She is asking the regulator to take on a substantial amount of extra work. Does she expect tech companies to contribute more towards the regulator's budget, or will the funding come from her own? When can we expect precise definitions of what brings a platform into scope? A list of banned platforms has been briefed today, but it's not clear why some do not make the cut. Can she guarantee this work will not distract from implementing the final stages of the OSA? What lessons has she learned from the circumvention of the Australia ban that will make the UK experience and our ban more effective? She talks of more effective age assurances, and I agree on the need to reset social norms. Will she be ruling out mandatory digital ID as a requirement for accessing social media? What privacy protections will be in place if children's images are taken as part of face scanning for age verification? Is she considering age verification at App Store level as a means not only of more reliable protection of children, but as a chance to reduce frictions for adults wishing to access social media? The government has said it's considering overnight curfews and breaks in infinite scrolling for under 18-year-olds. How do ministers square granting 16-year-olds the solemn duty to vote, but not the power to have a cheeky nighttime scroll on Instagram? The same applies to romantic chatbots. How is this going to work? Will these restrictions apply to 16-year-olds or 18-year-olds, given both meet the age of sexual consent? On efforts to prevent children from taking or sharing nude imagery, can she set out the scope of the law she's considering and categorically rule out client-side scanning tools being applied to adults' phones? We're told that the first set of regulations to enable the social media ban could be in effect in spring 27. How confident is the Secretary of State in achieving her timeline? She will understand this policy is not easily implemented, she's made reference to that, and she has detractors who share the aim but not the means, fearing a ban pushes children out of supervised accounts and towards riskier services. What does she say to those like Ian Russell who believe this policy is not only wrong but cynically timed? She suggests it comes down to enforcement of the OSA, which makes my earlier questions more relevant. And finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, I wish to ask the Secretary of State about her tweet last week on updating the Online Safety Act to remove illegal content with greater speed during, I quote, times of crisis. Now, the scenes in Belfast rightly appall every decent citizen in our nation. The vicious barbarism of Hadid al-Adid, just like the despicable murder of Henry Novak, has ignited anger and sparked protest that's led to indiscriminate violence against innocent people. Violence and protest can often mix, but are nonetheless two very different things. Laws exist that prohibit incitement, criminalise threats to kill, and stop platforms hosting illegal content, and they must rightly be enforced with strength. Peaceful protest, on the other hand, is a legitimate response to failure. In this case, perceived failure of the political class to adequately deal with concerns that the public's raised time and again via the ballot box. In such circumstances, I appreciate government has a job on its hands to make sure work to stop the spread of illegal content isn't perceived, or does not indeed become, an attempt to obscure legitimate political comment. So I ask what powers are being taken, how will times of crisis be defined, and what assurances can the Minister offer the House that she understands if government does not get its approach right, any actions she proposes risk stoking the very unrest that her policy is designed to subdue. Madam Deputy Speaker, for too long we've implicitly decided that childhood and parenting must simply adapt to the darker manifestations of the internet as the reality of modern life. Giving parents the support they need is not the same as the state stripping them of their ultimate responsibilities. But when harm from social media to our children is real and growing, the time comes for action, even when the answers are not perfect. I look forward to working with the Secretary of State in making sure the implementation of her policy is as close to it as it can be.
Secretary of State.
I'd like to thank the Honourable Lady for her statement, and I'm very glad at the end that she said there they will work with us to make sure that we implement this effectively. I think that's extremely important. I absolutely agree that this is a win for all the parents who have campaigned for this, and especially the bereaved families who had to relive the horror of what's happened time and time again. She made some comments about the Prime Minister. I want to be really, really clear about this. The reason we are moving so swiftly on this is precisely because the bereaved families have said to us, the longer you leave change, the worse it can be for children, and I have really taken that to heart and moved as quickly as possible here. I think it was right to have the consultation, not just because there are different views, but actually what we've heard is so overwhelming. I think that builds support for the ban. It means when we implement it, I hope it will last. And I would just say, the Online Safety Act did take 8 years from, the initial idea to implementation, and we've got to. The fact that this government has taken powers in the Children's Act means we can implement it in a much quicker. And as I said, I want the vote this year, by the end of the year, and I want it coming into force as early as possible, early first couple of months of 2027. She asked about Ofcom's enforcement and resources and capabilities. That's why I've asked them to do an urgent review. I would say they should look at their own resources first before coming to Parliament to ask for more. But I will, of course, look at what they say on that. She asked about the model that we're following. It is the model of... We plan to follow the model of Australia, and that covers not just, the companies I named in my statement, but others. That's publicly available. She rightly asked about highly effective age assurance measures. She will know these are already covered in the Online Safety Act for adults. Not all of those are appropriate for children. So we've asked Ofcom to look at this as quickly as possible to come up with what would work. I think that's really important. But privacy, as she will know, having read the Online Safety Act, is absolutely at the heart of those measures, and there are really strict requirements about any data that is collected, what it's used for, and how it should be deleted. The AI chatbot measure is for 18-year-olds and below, because we think that there are parallels there with issues like pornography. She also asked finally about my comments on essentially incitement to violence online. That's what I said, put out on X last week, which is if you incite violence online, it's the same as offline. And that's not acceptable. And this week in Parliament, we are laying Ofcom's updated code of practice about what to do during crisis moments, which essentially is you've got to take that illegal material down. I think most people in this country would agree that if you break the law, incite violence, you should face the full consequences of the law, whether it's online or offline, and that's what I support. And let me say this, I know normally in this House, there is a lot of theatre about the politics. I understand that. That is what this place is like. But I think the vast majority of members in this House do support a ban, and I hope we can all work together because parents, no matter what their politics, want the same thing. So let's crack on with the job.
Select Committee Chair, Chiawara.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And as so many parents know, and as my committee's ongoing inquiry into digital childhood has highlighted, British children have been the subject of a malign mass experiment designed purely to optimise corporate profits with horrifying, though largely unmeasured, harms at an individual and population level. And successive governments have been too ignorant, too ideological, or too in hock to big tech to act. And so the Secretary of State is to be congratulated on taking action. However, my right honourable friend knows that a ban is riddled with problems. Workarounds like VPNs, services like generative AI or WhatsApp not included, new ones popping up. It does nothing to address the organised acceleration of misinformation, which harms our children and whose consequences we saw on the streets of Belfast. So can I urge her once again to revisit my committee's 2025 report and go after the advertising-driven business model, which incentivises these harms and which is largely unregulated, and also to impose transparency requirements so we understand the challenge we face.
I want to thank my honourable friend for that, her question. I think I've said in this House before, I will again look at the recommendations in that report. My honourable friend, who is both in my department and the Culture Department, is actually chairing a joint task force on advertising to look at, how in the online world and what more we can do there. As I said, the Online Safety Act does set out very clear legal duties on providers to remove what's illegal for everyone, what's harmful for children, but I am looking again at what more can be done, particularly during times of crisis, including boosted trusted sources, making it easier for people to reset their algorithms. And as I said, this week we're laying updates to Parliament to bring into effect Ofcom's strengthened code of practice for what happens during crisis time. But I'm sure she will, as always, push us to go further.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Victoria Collins. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. On behalf of children and parents across the country, we welcome the government finally taking action to keep children safe online. And I know how important this has been to the Secretary of State herself. For almost 18 months, the Liberal Democrats, as the first party to force a vote on the issue, have been pushing for action to raise the digital age of consent, implement doom-scrolling caps, health warnings and a film-style age rating to ban harmful social media for under-16s. Today, we welcome that the government has finally caught up with these calls to act and listened to the parents and tireless campaigners who have worked relentlessly and often in difficult circumstances. It is just a shame, however, for the Prime Minister. It doesn't seem it was this cry for help from parents and young people or the mounting evidence that finally made him act. But after months of dither and delay, what seems to be today is more like a panicked policy cobbled together ahead of a by-election and a backbench rebellion. With that last-minute rush, it's a real disappointment the government hasn't learned from Australia and other countries on how we can do better and deal with the root causes of online harm. Our Liberal Democrat harms-based approach would deal with the addictive algorithms and features, for example, from chatbots, not just the romantic companions or therapy bots that the government have announced, although we, of course, look forward to hearing more on this next month. Our approach is supported by more than 40 charities and experts who stand up for children in a safer online world. There's a clear framework for new platforms and future harms that have already arrived, whereas Australia is playing a game of whack-a-mole. So what can we do so we can learn to do better? And why hasn't the government learned from this, just as the Secretary of State said she would? So how will the government protect children from emerging threats and addictive features elsewhere and not just prevent young people from signing up? How is the government deciding what platforms are included? What framework differentiates, for example, YouTube from YouTube Kids? And will children still be able to access YouTube without an account as they can now? What addictive features beyond infinite scroll will be tackled? And what assurances are there beyond being strongly minded to act? We don't mind the Prime Minister borrowing ideas on this. We just wish he'd borrowed all of them and sooner. And we, of course, continue to offer our services to work together. Our approach bans harmful social media for under-16s by default and sets a new safety standard to make the internet a truly safer place, just like standards for films and toys that we've had in the offline world for decades. Children are growing up in the attention economy, where their focus is being sold. They deserve a government that treats this as a seatbelt moment, not a press release for Makerfield. Will the Secretary of State use this opportunity to truly hold tech giants to account and back a harms-based framework that puts children's safety truly at the heart of this quickly changing technological world?
I've got to admit, I'm not really sure whether she's for or against the ban. She's a Lib Dem, say members on the Conservative benches. So she asked what model. I did say in my statement that it is the Australian model. We've learnt the lessons, which is why we are having a focus on more highly effective age assurance measures. And to be very, very clear, there has to be rigorous enforcement, including of more risky sites. That's what I've talked about, what I want Ofcom to do. And actually, we have taken powers in the Children's Act to implement the results of this consultation, which includes restrictions on features and functions. So that will allow us. I think this is one of the really important issues, because you will restrict some features and functions and they will come up with others. But the powers in that Act allow us to move more quickly. One of the things that has really struck me is we just can't have it taking 8 years because technology is changing so fast. So I'm always very happy to talk to him. Let me just finish with this point about the Prime Minister. He absolutely believed in having this consultation because there are different views. I think it's been a good thing to do because it is clear, and this is not a rush. This is a deeply thought-through policy programme. I hope she'll rise above party politics and work with us to get it right, but I might be holding my breath.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As somebody who was in some of the rooms where this was being discussed, I just want to pay absolute tribute to the Secretary of State, who has fought incredibly hard, and by no means has any of this been rushed for any announcement. She has worked incredibly hard on it. I wonder if she could answer for me. Last week, the government announced that we would be age verifying on the basis of the device. And why we wouldn't use that same age verification on device level to ensure age verification in access to social media.
I know my honourable friend is a huge champion of and has pushed very hard for many of these measures and many more besides. I think this does link to the device level interventions that we have talked about, but we want this ban is going to be for 16 and I think it's really important that we give that clear limit. I would also say that I am very, very, very clear here on the device proposals that we expect them to act and we will legislate. We will legislate.
Damien Hines.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I welcome this morning's announcement. The platforms are not now off the hook, and of course the Online Safety Act operates up until the age of 18, and that is the age up until which the Children's Act 1989 requires protection of children to be in place. But I want to ask a very specific question. So this announcement this morning seeks to exempt messaging services, but it seeks to block stranger communication from strangers. So what is the net effect of those two things if you have a messaging service that allows anybody who knows your phone number to add you to a large messaging group?
Secretary of State.
So he's absolutely right to say that we aren't including things like WhatsApp in this. Parents have been really clear that they want to be able to contact their children, but we do want to block strangers being able to communicate with children. We will be setting out all the details of this in our regulations. He knows I'll be more than happy to talk to him through the details of all this. But the messaging services aren't covered by the ban, but if they have features and functions where, as they do, that allow strangers to communicate with children, we absolutely want to deal with that, and we'll be coming forward with further details.
Emily Darlington.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, the Honourable Secretary of State and I don't necessarily agree on the effectiveness of a ban. Where we do absolutely agree is on companion chatbots. The entire business model of these companion chatbots is to keep us and our children online for as long as possible using grooming language and grooming behaviour and sometimes sexual circumstances in order to data mine us and, more importantly, our children. Can the Secretary of State make it absolutely clear via the dispatch box that we will not tolerate these types of business models exploiting us and our children?
My honourable friend is a passionate advocate, and absolutely we're really clear that these so-called romantic or companion sexualised chatbots are wrong for children. We will ban them. We will ban that function in general chatbots. We've seen that on something like X, so it's not just that. I think there's further to go on AI chatbots, and I've said I will make a further statement to the House in July on the other measures. I'm more than happy to talk to her about that. The reason that we have done this, the big announcement today about the ban is the sooner we make the announcement, the sooner we can lay the regulations, have the vote and bring it into effect. But as I said, there is much more to do, and I'm very happy to talk to her about this further.
Malthouse.
Oh, thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Not before time, but the statement is extremely welcome, and I congratulate the Secretary of State for extracting it through what must have been very complicated government machinery. A couple of quick questions, if I may. First of all, just for clarity, because my school WhatsApp groups have lit up, as I'm sure many others have today, could you just confirm that enforcement will all be against the platforms and not against parents? She knows that screens are the major source of conflict within the home at the moment. We don't want to start thermonuclear war in homes up and down the land. So it will be for the companies, not for parents. Second question, how is she going to stop the development of similar attributes within gaming environments, which are often, on servers overseas, and develop sophisticated ways to overcome these the barriers that she may put in their way? And then thirdly, is she going to be looking, very quickly, Madam Deputy Speaker, is she going to be looking at the design of content that remains on mainstream entertainment for children, which has moved much more towards the flickering lights mode of engaging children's attention, and may well now blossom and bloom in the absence of social media?
I mean, it's quite cheeky, 3 questions, but absolutely the enforcement is on the companies, not the parents, not the children. He will know that under the Online Safety Act, we can already have the potential to fine companies up to 10% of their qualifying worldwide revenue, as well as block service availability if they repeatedly break the law. That's what is already there. We're obviously finalising our proposals here, but that's where the responsibility lays. I would say that what we're trying to do is we've got an overall ban on social media platforms with a plan to use the Australian model, but we also have the ability to deal with specific features and functions in other services if we think they are risky to children. I'm sorry, I forgot the 3rd question, but I will write back to him when my officials tell me.
I thank the Secretary of State for her statement and warmly welcome the decisive action she has set out today. She has agreed with the Education Select Committee in our evidence-based conclusions that social media harms currently outweigh the benefits for children, that technology companies cannot be trusted to regulate themselves, and that we need to reset completely the relationship our children have with the online world. Our evidence demonstrated that a ban is not enough, and that when young people start using social media, hopefully post-16, it should be free from the most harmful, addictive features. Can I ask the Secretary of State that the tech sector is constantly innovating and evolving? Can she say whether and how the list of banned applications will be reviewed so that it keeps pace with the innovation in the tech sector and doesn't become out of date?
She's absolutely right there, which is why I think we're doing what I call Australia Plus, because there's the ban on the providers, on the platforms providing their services to children, and then there's additional features and functions, and we now have the power in legislation to do that. I hope that will allow us to keep up, but I do want to say I did read carefully their report, and I was very struck by not only the support for an outright statutory ban, but that you said this is a foundation for action rather than a complete solution. I strongly agree with this. I don't think this is the whole story, and we will continue to engage with her and members on her select committee because we've got to keep pace with change.
It is highly unlikely that everybody will get into the debate. There are far too many people bobbing and we have a lot of business to get through. Having said that, if questions were 30 seconds and the answers were 30 seconds as well, we could get the majority of people in. Martin Wrigley.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. It sounds like the Secretary of State is hearing a fairly unanimous view from members of the Select Committees, which is good. The move is welcome today. This ban is a welcome start, but I think it's only a start and it's not sufficient. Does the Secretary of State agree with me and the Select Committee that as well as parents and children taking action, the responsibility must be on the companies as well as the enforcement? They are providing the product. Recommendation engines make them publishers of dangerous and addictive content and not passive platforms which they would put forward, and they are doing it for financial gain.
Yes, I agree it's on the platforms, and they've got to continue meeting their obligations under the Online Safety Act as well as this ban. They've had chances to make their platforms safe. They haven't. That's why we're saying you can't provide them to children anymore.
Amanda Hack.
I thank the Secretary of State for her statement and welcome the decisive action she's taken. As a parent, I've seen firsthand just how harmful predators stalk gaming sites. I'm glad that these have been included. As students in North West Leicestershire complete their GCSEs this week, can the Secretary of State, who mentioned it in her statement, just provide more great content and data about how we will make sure free education resources will continue and how this will be implemented in light of the ban?
And so I think it's really important that two things happen. Firstly is that there's more support for parents and for schools to do what many are already doing, which is preparing children for their life online. We've had a big national curriculum review. There's new measures coming in place from this September, but there'll be more when the full curriculum review comes into place. And we're doing a huge amount to support schools to provide wider support for sport, art, culture, school plays. And I take that cough from Madam Deputy Speaker that I'll write some more.
Bradley Thomas.
Madam Deputy Speaker, well, this is a really important topic and a really important announcement about children's health, safety and well-being, and I wish the government well as it navigates probably some very thorny topics in bringing this into effect. Can the Minister give any indication as to what accountability will look like for platforms who will be tasked with enforcing this?
I mean, it is more complicated than it seems, but in the end, to govern is to choose. There are strong requirements already on companies under the Online Safety Act, as I said. The fines and the potential service blocks are already in that Act. We're developing further measures, but that is how we'll hold their feet to the fire.
Colin.
The Secretary of State knows I have concerns about the enforceability of a platform-based ban, but I welcome the news around infinite scrolling and tackling that. It affects people of all ages. One concern I have is for young LGBT people growing up in often unsupportive environments and the support they can find from others in similar circumstances online. I know from personal experience how valuable that can be. Does the Secretary of State agree that support like that is important, and if so, how will she ensure it can continue?
Secretary of State.
That is one of the issues that I thought extremely carefully about going through this. It was one of the real things for me that made me unsure, as we were going through this. Young people are still able to go online. I think there will be new resources and new support available in different ways that doesn't meet the model that Australia uses. But I am more than happy to speak in further detail with him and members of the LGBTQ community, because it's really important that people, if they live or love in a different way, are still able to connect, especially if they don't feel able to in their own community.
Christine Jardine.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I know from my mailbox that today's statement will be widely welcomed by parents in Edinburgh West who are concerned for the safety of their children and the impact of social media on them. But I wonder if the Secretary of State would also agree that there are societal dangers as well. A lot of children are directed away from neutral sites towards anti-Semitic influences, Holocaust deniers, violence things, and that there are wider implications. It's not just the obvious problem we should be looking at, but the less obvious ones as well.
The Honourable Member is absolutely right, and certainly in England, we are looking deeply at the curriculum. It's not just that under new RHSE guidance, children will be taught about social media and AI and deep fakes, but the wider curriculum review will look at critical thinking about how do you trust things you see online, where are they coming for, what are the implications, whether that's misogyny or anti-Semitism. I think we do need to prepare children for that life and future. We're certainly doing that in England, but I'm more than happy to share with her the evidence of that.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I welcome the Secretary of State's actions to protect children from online harm, especially the harms-based approach that she's taking. Madam Deputy Speaker, I've heard evidence from educational digital content creators whose resources are a lifeline for young people. Will the Minister commit to look at exemptions to ensure that teens above 13 don't lose access to the long-form educational resources?
Yes, our list of exemptions is precisely so that we do not capture those educational resources. I've seen them in my own constituency, the brilliant things that can help young people learn and get on and actually narrow the disadvantage gap between rich and poor kids. So I really want to make sure they're exempt.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. There's a great deal to welcome in what the Secretary of State has said, but she will know that detail really matters. So can I ask her 2 points of detail arising from her letter to Ofcom published today? The first is she talks about launching a rapid assessment of what highly effective age assurance looks like for determining whether someone is over 16. Can I ask her why that work is being commissioned after the announcement has been made and not before it, given the integral importance of age assurance to her policy, isn't it important for the government to know it can be delivered effectively? And secondly, in relation to the child safety duties under the Online Safety Act, will she confirm that what will likely happen now is that a children's access assessment will demonstrate that for those platforms with highly effective age assurance in place, they will not now need to go on and carry out a children's risk assessment in relation to anyone under the age of 16?
Just a moment, Secretary of State. I can understand how important this debate is, but members can ask one question that fundamentally lasts under 30 seconds. Secretary of State.
We've asked for this rapid review of highly effective age assurance measures so that it can come in well before the regulations are laid and they are voted on in the House, so that people can look at those, question and absolutely make sure that they're going to work. And I will write to him about the other question because I don't want to get into any more trouble.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I want to thank the Secretary of State and her team for the work on this. I want to better understand how the government will look at social media companies to make sure there is transparency on the algorithms they are using to ensure that they're not continuing to target children.
I think this has been a really important question and was something that researchers have raised about being able to assess the impact and know what the social media companies actually know themselves so that they can better scrutinise and assess the evidence, and I hope we'll be doing more on this soon.
Brendan O'Hara.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the SNP welcomes today's statement in addressing what is a clear and growing threat to our children's well-being. The devil, of course, will be in the detail, but we will work constructively and positively to make sure they're meaningful and effective. Platforms such as Roblox, where games are user-generated, have a chat functionality and therefore pose a risk to children being exposed to inappropriate content, online predators and scammers. How will the government tackle those sort of gaming platforms which are in reality just another form of social media?
As I think I said earlier, we have this ability within the Children's Act now to restrict certain features and functions. That's why we've are able to say for those under 16, we will restrict, we'll ban live streaming and stranger communication, and that we would also have that turned off by default for 16 and 17-year-olds, because we don't want to include all of gaming under a blanket ban. No, we don't. But if there are particular functions that we think risk children, as we know stranger communication does on gaming, then we will act.
Josh Dean.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. A decade ago, I marched with other young people to Parliament Square calling for votes at 16 to be introduced after the Brexit referendum, and I'm proud that this Labour government is doing that. But how will we ensure that young people are well informed when they go to cast their first ballot, given that they are digital natives and get a lot of their information online?
So what I would say is this. Firstly, young people can still go online. I actually think that for all sorts of news organisations, BBC, Sky, all sorts of different ones, this will actually be support them doing even more to provide that news information, perhaps created by children, for children, in an appropriate and effective manner. And my right honourable friend, the Minister for Culture, who's also within my department, is specifically looking at this issue. I would just say, it's not only a 5-second TikTok reel that can teach you about news. There'll be other ways of doing it, and we want to support them.
Paul.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Firstly, I just want to say that I really welcome this restriction on social media for children. As a mother, I am grateful for it, and I'm grateful to everyone across the House who has pushed for this. And as already alluded to, clearly there will be practical issues and difficulties with implementing, and I think we all need to work together in order to address that. But one of the things I would quite like to understand from the Secretary of State is what consideration has been given to enforcing through the device as opposed to age verification on the social media providers.
Well, this is, as she knows, the Prime Minister has already said that we want to act on devices to stop children taking, viewing or sharing nude images. What we're talking about today is on the social media platforms that we need to have those highly effective age verification measures. I think sometimes when we debate this in the House, is, it's either or. I think we need to take action on all these fronts. We need to keep the implementation of the Online Safety Act. We need to tackle devices to stop kids taking and sharing and seeing nude pictures, and we need to put these restrictions on AI chatbots and social media platforms because that's how we're going to keep kids safe.
McKinnon. Speaker, and I want to thank the Secretary of State for her statement today and the leadership that she has shown on this issue. A mother stopped me as I boarded the train today. She was beaming and she just said, "Thank you so much. This is going to make such a difference to my 13-year-old boy's life." And I think there are many parents that will sleep a lot easier tonight knowing that the help is coming. And does she agree with me that this is not the end of children's life online? That will still exist, but this is a huge shift of power away from tech companies back towards children and their families to make sure that that life can be productive and constructive and include being outside and with their friends as well.
I agree with every single word she says. This is about actually liberating children from what can sometimes be a terribly oppressive life online, and it's about helping parents do what they want. They have faced a tidal wave of stuff that they've been trying to fight off, and we're just saying we want to back you to do what's right for kids. And I really personally want to thank my honourable friend for her support.
Munira Wilson.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I wondered if the Secretary of State could clarify, as she's modelled her social media ban on Australia, their definition of a ban includes companies taking reasonable steps to prevent under-16s having accounts with age-restricted social media platforms. She will be aware that platforms such as YouTube and Reddit, you don't need an account to access very harmful material. Could she clarify, is she banning children from accessing accounts or those websites altogether?
Secretary.
They will have to have, we will bring in highly effective age verification measures because we want to make sure we learn the lessons from what has happened in Australia. My honourable friend, the Minister for Online Safety, went to learn all of these lessons. I think there's much more that we will be saying as we draft those regulations and we take this forward. But my view is that is one of the big lessons. But I just want to be honest about this. Kids will get around it. Kids have always got around smoking, drinking. That's what kids, we've all done it. Maybe not. That is what they do.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I've had the absolute privilege of consulting with the young people in my constituency, every secondary school, Bedlington, Asherton and Blythe. There wasn't any one of them believed that an outright ban was the appropriate action to take. They all had issues, negative issues with social media, but they all said that the social media companies, the tech companies, should be taking more responsibility and they should be more accountable for what's being seen on these social media platforms. Can my right honourable friend say what avenues has been for young people to feed into this consultation, and can she give me a guarantee so I can tell these young people I've had my discussions with that their voices, these are the ones that's been impacted, are being listened to?
Well, we had a specific survey and consultation with children, 14,000 of whom replied. I myself personally met with young people in many honourable members' constituency, and I would just say this: I understand why people say put it onto the companies. They've got to keep their products safe, and if they don't keep them safe, they shouldn't be able to provide them to children and young people. Well, they haven't kept them safe, so they're no longer going to be able to provide them to children and young people. And I would also say this: I know that in response to the consultation, many of the children didn't want an outright ban, but 2/3 wanted a whole load of different restrictions. And in the end, it's for adults and the government to decide what is best. Their views have been heard, but we think that this is too risky and we want to have a reset for them and future generations.
Lewis.
This has definitely been the Secretary of State's finest hour, and I'm only slightly disappointed that for reasons of his own, the Prime Minister chose to upstage it in Downing Street. Can she tell the House what she thinks the main reasons are in Australia for, admittedly, according to AI, reports that as many as 61% of young people are indeed getting round the restrictions, and will she be working jointly with them to try and get this down to a more acceptable level?
Secretary? Right, first of all, kids are savvy. It's been an integral part of their life and they want to get around it. But just because, I'm going to be careful what I say this time, children try and get around things doesn't mean to say we don't have rules and boundaries, firstly. And secondly, we are trying to learn the lessons from Australia because they don't have the highly effective age verification measures we have here. We want to put those in place, but I'm not going to claim that even that will mean no kids are on those social media platforms. We've got to take a decision, draw a line in the sand, and do this as much for about the 8 and 9 and 10-year-olds, so that we reset their expectations. You won't be going on this till you're 16.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome this announcement from the Secretary of State this afternoon, and I think it's right that we do highlight the really difficult dangers exposed to our children. I think this isn't about saying that social media is unsafe. I challenge any parent in here, parent or carer, who doesn't know the lyrics for Cocomelon on YouTube. You know, it has its place, it works for some people, but equally, I wanted to raise with the Secretary of State the dangers of collecting children's personal data and the exposed and threats to leaks and hacks. I will declare that my email was hacked. My staff's email was hacked recently. This is a live threat. All that personal information in the wrong hands could pose a lot of problems. Is this something that they'll be looking at as they roll out this ban?
So I said in my statement I'm going to come back and make a further statement to the House in July, and that will include issues like raising the digital age of consent, so we have greater protections about the use of young children's data. I think that is a really, really important issue. Privacy has to absolutely be at the heart of this, because many parents and young people themselves are worried. So we've got further things to say in July, and I'm more than happy to discuss that issue with my honourable friend.
Chambers.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Certainly parents in Winchester are going to welcome the government taking action on this, and we welcome the Minister clarifying that it will be tech companies that will be responsible for enforcing this, and it won't be parents, the onus will be put on the parents. But just to push the Minister on AI chatbots again specifically, it's excellent that we're removing access to chatbots that allow sort of sexual relations and sexual content, but there's so much other misinformation and bad health information being given by chatbots, and that includes people with eating disorders being advised to get weight loss drugs, and misogynistic attitudes not being challenged. Could the Minister comment more on that, please?
So I'm going to come back in July and say more about this. Chatbots telling kids not to eat and all this dreadful stuff is wrong, but if there are mechanisms for helping support therapy that could get my CAMS waiting lists down in Leicester, I would be very, very... So we need to look at properly regulated, proper therapy sites could be good, but I'll come back and say more about that. I want to get rid of the bad ones, protect the good ones, but that is a little bit more complicated, so we need to take a bit more time.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The message from over 1,200 North Somerset parents like myself, children and families, could not be clearer. They wholeheartedly welcome the direction of travel today. But spring 2027 feels too long to wait. Every day that passes is another day in which children are exposed to harmful algorithms, addictive features, inappropriate advertising and contact from strangers online. So I ask my right honourable friend, what are the barriers to an implementation date that could be sooner?
You know, there's a process we normally go through when you lay regulations, that there's a certain amount of time for parliamentary scrutiny. And I'm trying to balance giving members a say and looking at these and making sure we got them right and they're going to work with cracking on as quickly as possible. I would still say early 2027 compared to the time it normally takes for a whole bill to go through Parliament is much quicker. But I take his, determination to push this forward, and I will do what I can to get this over the line as quickly as possible.
Ramsey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I very much agree with the Secretary of State about the gravity of the risks and the need for urgent action to protect young people's well-being online. It's often the most vulnerable young people who are most likely to be exploited online, but it's also often the most vulnerable young people who use online channels for seeking support for their vulnerabilities. Can she assure the House that action will be taken to support the most vulnerable young people? And does she agree that addressing the hollowing out of social services is a crucial part of that?
So this is another thing I was really concerned about, alongside supporting young people who might like things or live or love in a different way. How do they actually connect with people? And this trusted support is really important. The DCMS is working hard to boost things like mentoring and support services. They've just announced £10 million for a new youth opportunity programme with the King's Trust and Sir Gareth Southgate. There's more we can do there. I'm more than happy to talk to him about his ideas, because we've got to make sure people can get trusted advice easily. But on balance, I feel the risks of social media, of exploiting vulnerabilities, outweigh the potential benefits. Let's try and find a way through.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I want to welcome my Right Honourable friend's announcement. She's worked tirelessly on this issue. Can I draw her attention to over 16-year-olds who are vulnerable and being targeted by organised criminals, by predatory behaviour predators, sexual predators, and can she also look at, and also extremists, far-right and religious extremists who are radicalising them online, can she also set out how she'll work with other departments on ensuring that vulnerable young adults are protected alongside this very important announcement she's made today?
She's right that what I've announced today isn't a silver bullet for all these challenges. I'm setting out what we can specifically do on the online world, but the truth is we've got to provide that wider support. And I'm, as always, very happy to talk to her about her ideas about across government what more we can do to protect those vulnerable children and young people and deal with the issues she raises.
Monica Harding.
Speaker, I welcome the ban, and I know that the thousands of parents like me of the frontier generation, those children that were born after 2004 at the advent of Facebook, will be welcoming it too. But as the Secretary of State has said, children get round bans, and there are also vulnerable children that are over 16 that will be vulnerable to this. So what will the government do to introduce legally enforceable safety by design duties on the tech companies to ensure that all kids, even those that slip through the net, are safe?
Look, it's not either or, either enforce the Online Safety Act or do a ban. There are clear requirements on tech companies to remove illegal content for everybody and harmful content for children. We will continue to enforce that. And I would just say, just because we know children will try and get around it doesn't mean we shouldn't put these measures in place. There's more we can do on enforcement. It is for the tech companies to keep those children safe. They have had ample opportunity to do so, and now we're saying you can no longer provide your services to children.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Parents across North Warwickshire and Bedworth have told me overwhelmingly in my survey that they feel powerless to protect their children from the harms of social media, telling them they're not pretty enough, thin enough, cool enough, good enough at their favourite sport, or worse still, sharing pictures without their consent or pushing suicide. Now is the moment we say enough is enough, to put children's health and happiness first, but we know that a ban alone will not be enough. Does the Minister agree with me that the cliff edge at 16 must be avoided and kids who do get around the rules protected by compelling big tech to take action to protect everyone rather than continuing to profit from the doom-scrolling division, hatred and despair?
I absolutely agree that this isn't a one and done, that there's more that we've got to do, that the tech companies need to abide by our law in our land on the Online Safety Act. She is a powerful champion for her constituents. I want to avoid that cliff edge. I want to take further action on restricting features and functions. And as I say, there's more to come in July.
Speaker, can I thank the Secretary of State for her statement today and the efforts she's taking to protect children and young people from harms of social media. I also welcome her sentiment that social media platforms themselves have more to do and more greater responsibility to keep our children safe. Can I just ask her, with that in mind, will there be greater consequences for those platforms who, for whatever reason, still allow and provide services to children online?
Yes, as I said, in the Online Safety Act, we already have powers to fine companies up to 10% of their qualifying worldwide revenue, and for companies that repeatedly refuse to obey the law, Ofcom can apply to the courts to block their services. We haven't finalised the fines and consequences, but that shows you the direction of travel.
Chris Bloor.
Madam Deputy Speaker, hundreds of parents and young people in Redditch contacted me regarding the government's consultation. Many of them will welcome today's announcement as a critical step to protect our children and end the unfettered social media experiment on our children. The Secretary of State knows this won't be a silver bullet in keeping our children safe online, and I know she will do this anyway, but can I implore her to keep up the pressure on the negligent tech giants that have acted with such impunity throughout this process?
For the good people of Redditch and the rest of the country, yes, I will.
Jim Allister.
Thank you. I greatly welcome this ban and the fact that it will apply across the United Kingdom. But could I ask the Secretary of State, is she satisfied that there are no cross-border loopholes, such as children in Northern Ireland could exploit with the Irish Republic? In that, are there any virtual private networks that could be used to allow children to still sign on?
So we will come back to the issue of VPNs in July. I've commissioned further research about their usage. You know, there's really important issues to balance here. Many people want to use them for privacy issues, and I think that's important. But we also know that some children use them to get around this. But I'm coming back to this about our response to the consultation on this in July.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the statement regarding safety of our children online, and I've been grateful to the young people of Bolton, South and Walkden who shared their views with me. But children should not obviously be an afterthought in the implementation. So can I ask the Secretary of State to confirm that their voices have genuinely shaped today's decision and assure us that the House, that these measures, when they're being implemented, children remain front and centre as the architects of their own online world?
Secretary of State.
So I really understand that this will be extremely difficult for many children who are on social media today. I know that it will cause a lot of worry and disquiet, and I want to make sure their views and voices continue to be heard. I would say that I was quite struck from the results of our survey about just how many children want risky features restricted. 2/3 of those, all sorts, more than half want restrictions on infinite scroll, almost 2/3 on explicit image sharing, location sharing, almost half on live streaming. So I think children do want to see change. I think it will be hard for them to manage this transition, but that is what we need to do to build a better future.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the Secretary of State's realism that the bans announced today won't be 100% perfect. So can she tell me what proportion of under-16s does the government expect will be prevented from accessing social media?
We haven't set any targets or goals for that. I do think having more highly effective age verification measures will make a difference. But as I said, I just want to be honest about this, that this is about today's children, but it's even more, I think, about children who are growing up now, that we reset those expectations and cultural norms so that kids know you won't be online till you're 16.
Ms Webb.
Speaker, thousands of parents in Blackpool and local organisations such as Alliance for Children, led by the inspirational Paul Wright, who's been here today in the gallery with bereaved parents, will welcome today's news. So thank you, Secretary of State. Can you outline what lessons this government has learned from countries such as Australia regarding the effectiveness of this approach, and how will it ensure that any measures, whether restrictions, regulation or education, effectively reduce exposure to harm, and will she consider banning VPNs for under-16s as well?
So, I'm glad that his constituents, he believes, will support this. We have my honourable friend, the Minister for Online Safety, spent a week in Australia learning the lessons, including about how kids are getting around the ban. That is why we've already said we want more highly effective age assurance measures. I'll come back to the issue of VPNs and young people in July, but I am sure there is, he and others, and I think it's really important that we continue this discussion. We want it to be as effective as possible, but we also need to help parents with younger children just begin to shift those social norms. Because what happens is the kids really want it, all their friends are on it. So even if you set your boundaries and your rules, you're under constant pressure. We're just saying we're on your side, we're going to help you do the right thing for your kids.
Mohammed.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I want to say a massive thank you to the Secretary of State from myself and on behalf of the parents in Dewsbury and Batley. But we've also argued in this place that the root problem lies in the illegal content, the harmful content, and the deliberately addictive design of these platforms, which impact not just children but adults alike. So what will the government do to introduce and enforce regulation to ensure that the platforms and the services and the features that they provide are safe for all?
I think this is a wake-up call for the companies. You had your chance. You didn't fulfil your existing obligations under the law. Enough. I think that is really important for us to say. And, you know, they will remain responsible for fulfilling their obligations under the British laws to remove illegal content and remove harmful content for children. I think that is hugely important. We stood up to Grok and X and Elon Musk and said enough isn't enough. And we're drawing a line in the sand now too.
Martin Cordova.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I want to thank the Secretary of State and this government for the decisive action they are taking in introducing a ban for social media for under-16s. I know that many teachers, parents and carers in Battersea also welcome this. At a recent roundtable that I chaired with young people, one shared that he was on his phone for 14 hours in one single day, which highlights just how serious this problem is. So will the Secretary of State commit to working across government to look at some of the eye health impact that excessive screen time use is having on our young people, and where necessary, commit to carrying out research on this important issue?
I am really glad my honourable friend raised this issue. It was actually an important point in the response from the Academy of Medical Royal Colleges, precisely about the physical health implications as well as the mental health implications for young people. She will know that we've already published guidance on screen time use for under 5s. We're currently reviewing it for 5s to 16s, but I listened carefully to that medical evidence, and that's one of the reasons why we're taking this action. But of course, I know there'll be more to do.
Tessamont.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Thank the Secretary of State for her statement. It's brilliant. Can I raise concerns about the historic data held by social media companies, and has she thought about what powers she and parents and carers might hold to invoke something like the right to be forgotten, so that the children's records and data footprint is destroyed, if that's what's wanted, and the social media companies' memories are wiped, and if they don't comply, a real penalty is enforced?
That's not part of the announcement that I've made today. I'm always willing to look at people's arguments about different issues. Actually, on a separate issue, you know, we actually have now taken action to actually try and preserve some of the data preservation notices for parents who've lost their children because they want to see what they've been looking at online. So I think we would have to tread carefully on this.
Please, Dodds.
527 of my constituents told me they wanted a ban. Only 7 were against. I'm delighted the government has listened to them. Now, of course, parents also said in the consultation they wanted action on recommender algorithms which, as we know, are increasingly radicalising many adults, given the increasing amounts of extremist content they're seeing. So can I ask her, please, will she be coming back in July with measures to ensure transparency and user control on recommender algorithms?
I just want to be clear with my... thank you for a question, sorry. I'm trying to be short. She's campaigned tirelessly on this. The model in Australia we plan to use captures user-to-user platforms whose sole or significant purpose is to enable social interaction, which also allow users to post material alongside algorithms and those recommender actions. So part of the model and the plan that we plan to follow is precisely about saying children can't access social media platforms defined in that way. I think that is a big step forward. I know she'd like us to look at this further. I'm always open to discussion because, as I said, I'm very aware of all these other issues and we want to take action where we can.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the UK is home to world-leading and award-winning game studios. Now, some games rely on multiplayer communication as a core part of their design. So I wondered if the Secretary of State might be able to elaborate on when she was talking about banning features and functions of particular things, and whether or not the government have conducted any impact assessments on the UK game studios and the impact it may have on them.
We have a brilliant, fantastic, often world-leading gaming industry in this country. That's why we are not including games under the blanket ban. But I have been really concerned, not just from issues raised by honourable members, but the police and others, that strangers communicating with, not playing with, but directly communicating and messaging children, then taking them onto WhatsApp and grooming them, is a real and substantial risk. That is why we are narrowly focusing on that issue.
Pupils at St Bede's Roman Catholic Primary School for their Internet Safety Assembly. Now, thanks to their head teacher's regular Internet Safety Assemblies, St Bede's children are well versed in the subject. Does the Secretary of State agree that today's announcement will support the work of many schools and teachers and send a clear message to big tech that they must now match that commitment?
Absolutely. I think I've been very clear throughout this statement that the responsibility here is on the social media platforms. It's not about on parents or children. It's about them to take the action they need.
Helen Maguire.
Madam Deputy Speaker, parents are doing all they can to keep their children safe online and taking the initiative to achieve this. In Epsom and Ewell, I attended a phone-free childhood event at St Martin's School in Ewell, where there are over 150,000 people over the country who'd signed the pact, which was not giving their children a phone before the age of 14. So I welcome the announcement today. It's a step forward. But we need to ensure it's enforced. So when the ban is in place, what real enforcement ability will Ofcom have to ensure that social media giants are held to account to safeguard our children?
She's right to raise the issue of enforcement. That's why I've specifically asked the new incoming chair of Ofcom to do an urgent review of their capabilities and also to make sure that they focus rigorously on enforcement, including on riskier sites in case children go off the main platforms further underground. And thirdly, to make sure they publish a clear strategy and a proper report to Parliament on how that enforcement is going, because I know in the end the proof of the pudding is in the eating.
Irons. Madam Speaker, I'd like to thank the young people in my constituency from Art Blake Academy, Oasis Academy Arena, Oasis Shirley Park for meeting with me to share their views on how to keep them safer online. They were clear that they wanted action against the harmful aspects of social media, but wanted to protect the good bits. So can the Secretary of State outline what work is being done across government to ensure that young people continue to have access to safe opportunities to connect, both online and in their communities? And does she agree with me that it is time to give proper statutory protection to youth services to ensure all young people have somewhere safe to go, something meaningful to do, IRL?
She's absolutely right. I think we've made great strides with our £500 million in our Youth Matters National Youth Strategy, making sure we rejuvenate our youth services and give more access to sport and the arts. The Department for Education has got a new enrichment framework which will help schools and colleges. It's going to be backed by a £22 million enrichment programme that will be the details soon to help 400 schools in England to create excellent offer on enrichment. And DCMS is also investing £130 million additional support in activities like arts and culture, sport and physical activities, adventure and life skills and much more besides.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. There will be many families and parents which are relieved with the announcement today of the ban for those under the age of 16, but there will also be parents which will be frightened to a degree because of repercussions from children that have addictions. The Secretary of State has stated that children will be given the support. Will parents be given some support as well?
Yeah, absolutely. We've obviously already as a department published new help and guidance for parents about how to talk to children about their life online that's different at different ages, because it is difficult sometimes to talk to them about it. I think that the ban will actually support parents in doing the right thing. But I do deeply recognise that for many children and young people, this is going to be a big change. Of course, we want to do everything we can to support them through this.
With Cadbury.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and to the Secretary of State. The large group of 16 to 18-year-olds from my constituency, schools in my constituency, that I discussed a potential ban with, there was no consensus about whether or not there should be a ban, but there was strong consensus that they needed to see good quality information and education to provide harm. So will the measures that the Minister mentioned use the best knowledge on behaviour science that we have? Will the advice and information...
Secretary of State.
We do want to provide the very best advice and support based on the evidence for parents, but also through schools.
Deputy Speaker, I welcome the Secretary of State's statement, particularly the bit about communication with strangers and chatbots, and I'm sure the parents of South Devon will join me in that. However, we know that from Australia, an outright ban doesn't give the incentive to the big tech companies to redesign their platforms to make them less addictive, misogynistic and full of toxic, divisive misinformation. So how will the government continue to pressurise and incentivise the tech companies to make these changes? Because as she says, there will always be children who circumvent the ban, and there will be vulnerable adults and older adults who are also victims of such misinformation.
The Online Safety Act requirements remain. This is not either or. They've got to make sure they remove illegal content for everybody, remove harmful content for children, and as I have personally made a whole series of issues a priority offence under the Online Safety Act, whether that is self-harm, suicide, and all manner of other issues. So they have to not just take this stuff down, but actively look for it, and those requirements will remain.
Serena Brackenridge.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and huge thanks goes to the Secretary of State and all involved. This is the right decision, consulted in the right way. Tech companies have had more than enough time, but have chose to engineer for addiction and profit. Will she work across government to ensure that parents and schools have the support that they need during the transition, and alongside investment in the arts, music, drama, creative subjects and youth services, so children can be children?
Yes, I've had detailed conversations with the Culture Secretary and the Education Secretary about all these issues. There's much more to do, but we are determined to give those children the very best start in life and give them the freedom to be children again.
Robin Swan.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. As a father of 2 teenagers, on behalf of all their parents, can I thank and congratulate the Secretary of State in bringing forward this legislation today. She's already said a number of times, but children will find a workaround. Big tech will always and will be looking for a workaround as well to the legislation and the rules that are being brought forward. Can the Secretary of State give the reassurance that government will remain agile and also fund those organisations that will make sure this dangerous online activity doesn't flare up?
I think he raises, I thank him for his comments. You know, there are people who say there's obviously overwhelming support amongst parents and teachers and police and others for an outright ban. Then there are those who say, but you need to restrict these, the features and functions. And what I am saying in this ban is, if you only did features and functions, the truth is the tech companies would come up with another feature and another function and another one and another one and another one. And so what we're saying is, no, line in the sand, no one under 16 on these. But if there are specific features and functions that go beyond social media, like in gaming or in other sites, we want to restrict those too. I hope these new powers we've got in the Children's Act allow us to be more agile. But if they don't, I will always look again, because we've got to keep up with how technology is changing.
Rosie Whiting.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I want to thank the Secretary of State and the Minister for Online Safety for their engagement and conversations with this. I had social media before I was 16, and I deeply understand the concerns and have experienced the bad, but I also know the value, particularly for working class kids, of being able to see a world outside of your own. The value for the boy who's growing up without a father and learns to shave by YouTube, for the young person who teaches themselves to code, to shaping their career, for the LGBT community. So how is her department working directly with DFE and DCMS to make sure we identify these areas of need?
State.
As I said in response to an earlier question, this was the issue that I wanted to grapple with the most. because I think people want to find people who love in the same way, who like the same things if they feel like they're worried about doing that where they live with their friends. I think this is hugely important. I think there is potential for a life online to still enable those things to happen, but just not on those social media platforms. I want to continue working with the honourable member, who I have the greatest respect for, and with the Department for Education to make sure the chances that social media offered to some, that we have those chances still in place for people who want to experience different things and believe in different things, because we want to give everybody the freedom to express who they are.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In February 2023, Leo Johnson from Stourbridge died by suicide at the age of 19. His mother, Jane, remembers him as excited and energetic to start his life, and his passion for scuba diving fueled his decision to study oceanography at Plymouth University. He increasingly became absorbed in his phone and social media and told his friends that that was affecting his mental health, and not through dangerous content, but through that drip of comparison culture, leaving him feeling inadequate, anxious and numb. Does she agree that a ban is the right thing to do so fewer young people like Leo are harmed?
I'm so sorry to hear about what happened to Leo, and what she describes I've heard so many times during the course of this consultation, and in fact many in the representations we had from the different Royal Colleges for psychiatry, paediatricians and GPs and others precisely raised the issues she talks about. That is one of the reasons why I think this ban is so important, to protect children from those really serious harms, which actually, 2/3 of GPs and 2/3 of hospital clinicians now say they are seeing something that they think is as a direct consequence of social media every single week, and I think that is a wake-up call to us all.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I welcome the ban on social media from the 16s. I wish we weren't here, but it does represent a failure on behalf of the social media platforms to get their own house in order, and it was inevitable that we would get here in the end. But does she agree that we need to make social media safe for everyone, and that includes foreign influence, it includes accountability for its owners, so that when children do go to 17, 18 and into adulthood, that they're safe along with the rest of us?
Secretary of State? Yes, there are already requirements under the Online Safety Act for companies to remove illegal content which actually deal with this issue of foreign interference, particularly during elections. But as I said, I'm looking again at some of the recommendations that the Science and Technology Select Committee put forward on this, because of the concerns exactly as the honourable gentleman raises.
A final question, Mark Stewart.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Education Select Committee heard evidence from Snapchat, who in turn pushed back on any idea and the hard evidence and facts that their platform caused harm to young people at all. So it was perhaps no surprise that the E-Safety Commissioner in Australia opened an investigation into Snapchat for non-compliance with the ban over there. Against this backdrop, can the Secretary of State confirm that these social media companies will be held accountable should they try to subvert the new rules that we introduce, and that parents won't be held accountable for enforcing them?
Absolutely. This is about the social media companies putting their house in order. And I know lots of people have said, won't you bow to pressure, you'll cave under it, you'll let them get... And I hope today we show our intention that we want a better life for children, we want to put power into parents' hands, we want to reset social norms, and that is what this government is absolutely determined to do.
I tried to go as fast as I could, but we couldn't get everybody in. That is the end of the statement. I'll give the front benches a few moments. We must move on swiftly. We now come to the statement on Russian shadow fleet, and I call the Secretary of State, Dan Jarvis.
With
your permission, Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to update the House on UK operational activity against the Russian Shadow Fleet. Before I begin, I would like to take the opportunity to pay tribute to my right honourable friend, the member for Rawmarsh and Conisbrough, who led the department through a period of growing instability with a clarity of purpose and a sure judgment. I thank him sincerely for all that he did as a Secretary of State. He leaves office safe in the knowledge that our armed forces are better prepared and better supported than when he assumed it. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, this is my first appearance in the House since my appointment as the Secretary of State for Defence. It is a privilege and a responsibility beyond all measure, not least because this is a moment of challenge for our nation, and it is my job to make sure that we rise to meet that moment. Now, it's been some time since I left the armed forces. The tactics, technology and threats have all changed beyond recognition. The one thing, however, that has remained constant is the professionalism, courage and extraordinary skill of our servicemen and women. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, these virtues were exemplified in full yesterday in the English Channel. In the early hours of the morning, 25 miles south off the Isle of Wight, Royal Marine Commandos fast-roped under the cover of darkness onto the deck of the Smertos, a 244-metre-long oil tanker, which at the time of interception was travelling at 10 knots. Within a matter of minutes, our Marines had seized control of the vessel without resistance. They worked closely in this operation with specialist officers from the National Crime Agency and were supported by aircraft from the Maritime Air Group, including Chinooks, Merlin Mk4 and Wildcat helicopters, and RAF P8 and Type 23 frigate HMS Sutherland and Minehunter HMS Ledbury. I also want to take the opportunity to recognise the vital contribution of the Home Office's Border Security Command maritime teams. This was a highly complex operation executed with remarkable precision. Lasting 6 hours, this Royal Navy-led interdiction was the first of its kind for UK forces and the result of careful and meticulous planning across multiple government departments and agencies. All military and law enforcement personnel are safely accounted for. And I know that the whole House will join me in paying deepest respect and sincere thanks to the hundreds of people who were involved. Now, the vessel is now secured outside of port limits at Weymouth Anchorage. A 38-year-old Indian national has been arrested on suspicion of suspected sanctions offences. All other 24 crew members remain on board and are assisting the NCA. This is a live criminal investigation and further updates will be provided at the appropriate moment. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, in the days leading up to this interdiction, UK armed forces, supported by our allies, including France, to whom I am very grateful, closely tracked and monitored the vessel on the grounds it was suspected of using a false flag. This was a vessel sanctioned by the UK, sailing without nationality, transporting sanctioned Russian oil. And I can confirm to the House that this operation was conducted in accordance with international law, including the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea and the relevant domestic legislation. Yesterday's operation follows the support that the UK has provided the US and France in the interdiction of several Shadow Fleet ships this year. And in March, my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, made clear our intention to interdict Shadow Fleet vessels at a time and place of our choosing. This had a clear deterrent effect, with many vessels taking longer and more costly routes to evade action taken by the UK and our allies. Madam Deputy Speaker, let me expand on why this operation matters. We know who benefits from the Shadow Fleet. Over 700 vessels are used to move around 40% of Russian oil. And we know who suffers from the Shadow Fleet. Sanctioned oil is bankrolling Putin's brutal war in Ukraine. Every barrel sold helps fund the missiles and drones used to kill Ukrainians in their homes, destroy their infrastructure and break their will. This operation deals another blow to Putin. and we are clear with Russia about our intentions and our basis to act. We do not seek escalation, but we will always take the necessary steps to enforce UK sanctions. The UK has sanctioned over 550 Russian Shadow Fleet vessels. This has had a material impact. Nearly 200 have been forced to anchor because of the action of the UK and our partners. And yesterday's operation sends a clear signal to Russia that the UK and its allies can and will act against the Russian war machine. We will use every measure available to prevent the trade in sanctioned goods which funds Putin's illegal war. Now, yesterday's operation demonstrates that the UK's commitment to securing a just and lasting peace for Ukraine is absolute. I know that President Zelensky thanked the UK following the interdiction, yet we should remember that it is us who owe the Ukrainian people. They've now resisted Putin's full-scale invasion for more than 4 years and suffered under the pain of occupation for more than 12. And still they fight. For their security and for ours. For their values and for ours. Now, yesterday, I spoke to the Ukrainian Defence Minister to ensure him that whilst there has been a change in leadership in UK defence, there has been no change in our position. The UK will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes. And on Thursday, I will be at the NATO headquarters to co-chair the next meeting of the Ukraine Defence Contact Group and secure the arms and ammunition Ukraine's forces need to fight Putin's war machine. Madam Deputy Speaker, let me end by saying something that I have always believed, and that is that the defence of our nation is a shared endeavour. It falls to those of us who step forward to protect the country in and out of uniform, and we owe a debt of gratitude to all those people who exposed themselves to risk yesterday, to those who will do so tonight, tomorrow, and in the future. I have a responsibility now to them to make sure that they get what they need, and I am determined to fulfil those duties. I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Secretary of State, James Cartley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I thank the Defence Secretary for the advance side of his statement and begin by welcoming him to his new post. The Secretary of State had a distinguished military career and as Security Minister will have had a foretaste of the operational demands of his new job. I will be turning to the circumstances that brought him to that position shortly, but we wish him well in his position. Can I also welcome the new Minister for Veterans to his post and welcome his predecessor to her new role as Armed Forces Minister. Madam Deputy Speaker, I also pay personal tribute to the previous Secretary of State. On the day he resigned, I said he was an honourable man who had done an honourable thing, and I meant it. Whatever our political differences, I respect the dignity with which he left government on a point of principle in the national interest. On the seizure of the Russian Shadow Fleet vessel, the opposition welcomes this action and the way it was conducted. Throughout his time in office, the previous Secretary of State and I maintained a rock-solid consensus in support of Ukraine, standing shoulder to shoulder against the Russian threat. Whenever he announced action against Russian naval activity in our territorial waters, such as against Yantar, I welcomed it because we must stand strong against a serious threat posed by Putin. That's why it's important that this vessel was seized, but I do have one particular concern. It was back in March when the Prime Minister announced that British armed forces are now able to board sanctioned vessels that are passing through our waters. But since then, the BBC reports that in at least 94 instances, Shadow Fleet vessels crossed into UK territorial waters without a single one being interdicted by our armed forces. So until this weekend, almost 3 months after the policy was announced, no boarding of these vessels had taken place. What changed? On the specific action that took place, I pay tribute to all our brave armed forces and law enforcement personnel involved who conducted their mission to the highest professional standards. Because one thing is certain about those who serve in our military: give them the kit and they will do the job. But here is where the problem lies. This operation was necessary as part of our overall policy to deter Russia. However, that attempt at deterrence has been completely undermined by the total debacle of the Defence Investment Plan. Last week, we witnessed an unprecedented moment in UK defence, the likes of which has never been seen before, with the Secretary of State his deputy and 2 PPSs all resigning in total and unprecedented chaos. The Defence Secretary resigned from government because the money the Prime Minister was offering for the Defence Investment Plan was so meagre that it would, and I quote, make the country less safe and reduce the readiness of our forces and increase the risk to personnel on operations. That is a shattering verdict on this government's plans for defence, and it was one shared by the former Armed Forces Minister. Now, for some reason, he didn't get a mention in the Secretary of State's statement or in the response from his junior minister earlier. But as we are talking about the actions of our Royal Marines, let me put on record my huge respect for the former Minister for the Armed Forces and the way in which he too resigned on a matter of principle. We share a passion for delivering the drone revolution, and given his distinguished military record, it was damning for him to say that the Defence Investment Plan was, and I quote, not built for the threat we face. It is neither transformative enough nor sufficiently funded. In particular, in his resignation letter, the previous Armed Forces Minister stated that the Northern Ireland Troubles Bill is unfit for purpose. Hear, hear. We agree 100%. Just as the professionalism of our personnel was at the heart of this weekend's interdiction operation, standing by our veterans and serving personnel must be at the heart of defence policy. So as a veteran of Operation Banner himself, does the Secretary of State agree that the last thing the government should be doing is hounding former soldiers through the courts? If he agrees, will he therefore urge the Prime Minister to scrap the Northern Ireland Troubles Bill? On the core issue of funding, it will be deeply worrying for our allies in NATO to see the chaos now surrounding the Defence Investment Plan. Meant to transform our armed forces, the very Secretary of State responsible for delivering the DIP until 5 days ago said it will make us less safe. That's because the money on offer was nothing like enough. So is it true that the Prime Minister is refusing to give the Secretary of State any more cash for the Defence Investment Plan? If so, in principle, does he welcome the offer from the Leader of the Opposition to work with the government to find the welfare savings to fund defence? To conclude, Madam Deputy Speaker, as this is our first exchange at the dispatch box since his appointment, can I assure the Secretary of State that we are willing to work with him in the national interest to find the money for defence? Will he work with us?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm very grateful to the Shadow Secretary of State for his welcome. I was pleased to have the opportunity to speak to him on Friday evening. I do want to work constructively with him and colleagues on all sides of the House. I said in my opening remarks that I believe very strongly that the defence of our nation should be a shared endeavour. That is always the approach that I've taken in this House, and I very much hope that it is the approach that we can continue with. I'm also grateful to him for his support for yesterday's action, as well as the cross-party consensus that I am, as I'm sure he is, genuinely proud of with regard to Putin's illegal war in Ukraine. Now, I understand why he asked about the timing of the operation, but I can say to him, and he will know this from his own time as a minister in the department, that the activity that was brilliantly and bravely executed yesterday was the result of weeks of military and operational planning. I know that he will understand very well that the UK has played a critical role in the interdiction of a number of shadow fleet ships in recent months, including through close cooperation with our US and French counterparts. And the Prime Minister, as he mentioned, made clear our intention back in March that we would interdict shadow fleet vessels at a time and place of our choosing. And that is what we chose to do. The Shadow Defence Secretary mentioned the former Minister for the Armed Forces. I was saving him up, not least because he is someone that I hold in the very highest of regard. He is an honourable, gallant member, and it is very widely recognised that he has provided outstanding service to our country in the most difficult circumstances that anyone could ever imagine. I am beyond proud that he sits on this side of the House, and I look forward to listening to him and working closely with him in the future. Now, the Shadow Secretary of State, for entirely reasonable reasons, asked me about the Defence Investment Plan. I hope, though, in what I intend to be a spirit of constructive consensus, he will recognise that this government have spent over £11 billion more this year on defence than was the case under the last year of the previous government. Now, I hope that he will also understand that colleagues across government have been working on the Defence Investment Plan for many, many months. It is a hugely important and significant piece of work. It's the first line-by-line defence budget in 20 years. Now, I fully appreciate the desire of the Shadow Defence Secretary to see the content of that published as soon as possible, and I absolutely share that desire. And since being appointed as the Defence Secretary just a couple of days ago, I've been working very closely with my department and with colleagues across government to make sure that we progress this work as an absolute priority. The Prime Minister has said that we will publish this before the NATO summit next month, and we will.
Alex Baker.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I welcome the Secretary of State to his place, and we are looking forward to welcoming him to Aldershot and Farnborough for the National Armed Forces Day celebrations. Can I say on behalf of my constituents, I want to express our gratitude to the British personnel involved in the operation in the Channel for their immense bravery and professionalism. This is a major blow to Putin's regime, but it also underscores the growing Russian threat to European security. Everyone knows about NATO Article 3, but the lesser known NATO Article 3 is our commitment to preparedness. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that we need a total government approach to delivering NATO Article 3, with every minister clear on how they can help us to be prepared?
Secretary of State.
Well, I'm grateful to her, not least because she has been a doughty champion of the garrison town that is Aldershot, and she speaks with great passion and knowledge about these matters. She's right to raise concerns about the threat that we face from Russia. It is a threat that I've spent the last 2 years dealing with. She's also absolutely right for the need for a whole-of-government approach. That was an approach that I championed in my previous role across the Home Office and the Cabinet Office. And now within the Ministry of Defence, I look forward to working with my colleagues right across government to make sure that we have got the appropriate defences to guard against the threat that we undoubtedly face from Russia.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson James McCleary.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Secretary of State for advance sight of his statement and join others in welcoming him to his new role. Can I start as well by associating myself with the remarks made by colleagues and thank our Royal Marines. Through their bravery and skill, they have denied Vladimir Putin the fossil fuel profits he depends on, profits which, without their intervention, would have gone straight to Russia's front line against Ukraine. Their courageous action has already had a chilling effect on other Shadow Fleet vessels, with reports suggesting at least 6 ships altered course following the interdiction of the Smirtos. Now that we've taken this step, albeit several months after the Prime Minister initially promised, will the Secretary of State commit to stopping more Shadow Fleet vessels and ensure this isn't just a one-off? Liberal Democrats believe that we shouldn't just be stopping these vessels, but we should also be making sure that their seizure of their cargo can be used to fund Ukraine's defence. We've already called for the $30 billion in frozen Russian assets across Britain to be used to support Kyiv's war effort. We need to do the same with Shadow Fleet fuel. Will the Minister commit to seizing and selling the sanctioned oil being transported by the Smirtos and for any future interdictions, and send the resulting funds to Ukraine? The next critical step must also be to close legitimate routes to market for all Russian fossil fuels. Spearheaded by our leader in the other place, Lord Purvis, Liberal Democrats won an important concession last week on this issue, securing a commitment from the government to an end date for its waiver on sanctions for the import of diesel and fuel products refined by Russian crude. This gaping loophole should never have come into force in the first place. The government must now go further. Will the Secretary of State work with colleagues across government to ban all UK maritime services for the export of Russian oil, gas and coal? We must end once and for all the scandal of UK PLC helping to fund Putin's war machine.
Secretary of State.
Well, I'm grateful to him, Madam Deputy Speaker, for the very constructive tone of his comments, and I'm very keen to work with him and colleagues on his benches on these matters. I think he's absolutely right to raise the point about the deterrent effect. The Prime Minister's announcement back in March has been extremely helpful in that regard, and I understand and agree the sentiment of the points that he went on to make. I know that he will understand, and I referenced this in my earlier remarks, that because there is now an ongoing live criminal investigation, I'm not able to say anything more about the specifics regarding this vessel and the oil contained within it. He made some important points, I thought, about sanctions and the need to ensure that we are working across government. I give an assurance that that absolutely will be our approach. It's very important that, as a department, we work very closely with our colleagues in the Treasury, and very pleased to be joined by the Chancellor. And I also discussed these matters with the Foreign Secretary earlier on today, so I give him the assurances that he seeks.
Lloyd Hatton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Secretary of State for his statement. I would briefly like to pay tribute to our armed forces and the NCA for successfully intercepting the Russian oil tanker off the coast of Weymouth and Portland yesterday. As has been mentioned, this is the first British-led operation of its kind, and it delivers a blow to Putin's illegal war in Ukraine, which threatens our collective security in Europe. Regarding next steps, can the Secretary of State reassure my constituents that any potential environmental and public safety risks have been fully considered and that the right specialist teams are on hand to assist if needed? And while I fully appreciate the complexity of such an operation, can I politely urge the Secretary of State to maintain this posture and to exploit further opportunities to degrade Putin's war machine and scuttle Russia's shadow fleet?
Well, I'm very grateful to him, and of course he has an important and close constituency interest in these matters, and I give him the assurances he seeks. I thought he raised a number of important points, and given his close interest in these matters, I suggest he comes and has a brief from the Minister for the Armed Forces, who's just made that offer to him. But I'm grateful for his comments today, and we look forward to working closely with him on it.
Sir Julian Lewis.
May I wish the new Secretary of State the best of luck in his new post, and express the hope that the appearance of the Chancellor of the Exchequer alongside him on his first outing is not too symbolic of what's been going on, perhaps in back rooms behind the Treasury. And on the question of the seizure of the ships, does he agree with me that there is a possibility that Russia may, in response, start to think about escorting such ships by means of warships? This would, of course, expose Russia's hand very much more clearly, but it does bring a whole element of possible escalation into play, including the possibility of Ukrainian strikes against those ships. We all know how successful Ukraine has been in the Black Sea. It might end up doing something similar in the Baltic Sea and beyond.
State.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm grateful to the Right Honourable Gentleman, as I always am, for his sage counsel on these matters. He's been talking about them for very, very many years. He referenced the presence of the Chancellor on the front bench, and the Chancellor is someone who cares very deeply about our national security, and that is why she is here, to lend that support. He understandably raised a very important point about the risk and the threat of retaliatory action from Russia. He will know, because he and I have discussed it on many occasions, I've spent the last 2 years thinking very carefully about that particular point. Of course, we take every measure and use all of the tools at our disposal to guard against that. But I think he will agree that ultimately that the activity that we saw in the English Channel yesterday was the right one. We have to stand together against Russia in support of Ukraine, and that's what this government will do.
Alex Sobel.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd like to start by praising 42 Commando for the planning and execution of what could have been a very difficult operation. Today in Parliament we had the Ukrainian Speaker Ruslan Stepanchuk visit us, and the APPG hosted him, and he said that he hoped to see further action on the Shadow Fleet, including on the ARC-7 Arctic-ready LNG tankers, which are still unsanctioned by the United Kingdom. But could I also wrote to Minister Doughty, and he responded to me about the...
Order. The Honourable Gentleman has been here long enough to know that we don't refer to ministers by their name. Could he perhaps make sure that his question briefly finishes?
The Foreign Office Minister about the remaining licences for Russian fossil fuels, and he said that they would, and here he is, they would be ending in January 2027. Now the Straits of Hormuz are open. Could that not be finished earlier, because another 6 months of Russian profiteering from the UK is not acceptable?
Secretary of State.
Well, I'm very grateful to him for his reference to 4-2 Commando. He's someone who has a very long-standing support of Ukraine. I hope he heard my earlier remarks that my first international call as a Secretary of State was with my counterpart in Ukraine, who I will be meeting on Thursday. His point about the FCDO licences was well made, and my honourable friend has arrived right on cue.
Richard Ford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I'd like to congratulate the honourable member for Barnsley North on his appointment as Secretary of State for Defence. Given his experience as Security Minister, there are few members of this House who understand the threats better than he does. It was very welcome to learn last Friday that the government has committed to banning imports of diesel and jet fuel made from Russian oil by the 1st of January. And it was impressive to see a shadow fleet vessel interdicted in the English Channel this weekend. But given that this is one of it's one of 550 sanctioned shadow fleet vessels, does the Secretary of State think the government would do well to revoke that licence to import diesel and jet fuel made from Russian oil before the end of this year?
Secretary of State.
We're reviewing it every fortnight. I made a commitment.
Well, I'm grateful to him, not least as a fellow veteran and someone who's served on the ISC, so he speaks with authority about these matters. He's made an important point, and I've been given assurances by my right honourable friend that we keep these things under very, very close review.
Dame Annalise Dodds. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I also want to commend our brave forces for their skillful action and welcome my right honourable friend to his place. He just spoke passionately about defending British values. Of course, at the same time as our own brave forces were planning their decisive action against the Russian shadow fleet, Stephen Yaxley-Lenin was praising Russia, sat alongside Errol Musk in Moscow. So will he seek to work with colleagues across government to join up action against Russia's shadow fleet with action to defend our country against Russia's shadow influencing operations? Secretary of State.
Well, I'm very grateful to my right honourable friend. I think she makes a very, very important point, and I think there is widespread agreement for it. She will know that I spent much of the past 2 years doing exactly what she describes, and I look forward to working closely with my predecessor to make sure that we prosecute Russia's proxies and counter their illegal activities wherever it raises its ugly head.
Dr. Andrew Murison.
Can I warmly congratulate the right honourable gentleman on his appointment and wish him all the best of luck. He'll certainly need it. I congratulate all involved in the successful operation in the Channel. The reputation of our troops, of course, is peerless, and this operation follows similar operations by our allies, France, Germany and the US. But can I press the Secretary of State on the point raised by my honourable friend, the Shadow Defence Secretary, in relation to the Northern Ireland Legacy Bill, which he did not address, and which, as a Op Banner veteran, surprised me slightly. He must have a view on this. Will he now make sure in his new office that this dreadful measure is cancelled and bring comfort to those who are threatened by it?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm very grateful to him, not least for the experience that he brings to these matters, and he knows the huge regard that I have for his constituents, not least because of their very long-standing support for the armed forces. He's right to praise them, and he's right to reference the importance of their reputation. The reputation of our armed forces is something that we can all be proud of. It goes right around the world. I hope, though, he will understand that the purpose of my appearance here today is to give an operational update based on the activity that took place in the English Channel yesterday. I think he will understand that just a couple of days into the job, I'm not in a position to provide a further update on the matters that he raises. He knows how seriously I take them. He knows that I will consider the matter that he's raised and work very closely with my colleagues in other government departments, including the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. And no doubt we will both have more to say about it soon.
Jim Dixon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Secretary of State for his update, welcome him to his place, and also join him in paying tribute to the exceptional bravery and skill of those who carried out the recent operation on the Shadow Fleet. Does he agree with me that it's absolutely vital we continue to squeeze the Russian economy in every way we possibly can, including many more operations of this kind against the Shadow Fleet, so that we can ultimately support Ukraine in a successful outcome in resisting Putin's illegal war?
Secretary of State.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, he's exactly right to raise the points in the way that he does. I'm joined on the front bench by my colleague from the Foreign Office who takes these matters incredibly seriously, and I know that there is a huge activity right across government. I think it's also important to highlight the continued support for Ukraine. Not least, the UK's largest ever drone package for Ukraine delivered 120,000 drones this year. So squeeze the Russian economy, yes. Support our Ukrainian partners to make sure that they can stay in the fight and win it.
Vicky Slade.
On Saturday night, I heard the unmistakable sound of Chinook helicopters passing over my home in Dorset, en route to intercept the Russian tanker. But whether it's Shadow Fleet funding the war against Ukraine, spy ships scanning our seabeds, political interference of our democracy, including the former Reform leader in Wales taking bribes, it is clear that Russia are upping their game. So, as I asked last week about energy, food and information security, what assurance can the new Secretary of State give us about how this is being addressed to keep us all safe at home?
Secretary of State.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm very grateful to her. The sound that she described at the beginning of her remarks is one that I am very familiar with. It's one that makes the hairs on the back of my neck still stand up to this day. I know she has a very long-standing interest in these matters. I thought she raised an important point. I give her the assurances that we seek, that we work collaboratively across government to maximise the deterrent effect on Russia and their illegal activities, and wherever we can seek to do more to prosecute activities against them, then we will absolutely do so.
Amanda Martin.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and I welcome the Secretary of State to his place. Madam Deputy Speaker, operations such as this demonstrate an incredible level of planning, coordination, professionalism across our armed forces, police, border force and wider government. And to all those involved, I pay tribute and say thank you. For a city like Portsmouth, which has supported generations of those who serve, this is a reminder of the importance of expertise. So can the Secretary of State confirm that all departments work closely together and will continue to do so in a safe and legal and effective operation? And can he confirm that this operation was conducted in a way that ensured the safety of UK citizens and our military personnel involved?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm very grateful to her. She's right to draw attention to the meticulous planning that undergoes these kind of complex military operations. There are lots of moving parts. There is risk that is carried by those brave enough to undertake them, and we owe them a huge debt of gratitude. Just say one other thing to my honourable friend, because the other huge debt of gratitude that we owe is to the family members of those who stepped forward, of which I know that she is proudly one.
Sir Alex Shelbrooke.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I may first of all offer my congratulations to the right honourable and gallant gentleman. He is a good fit for the role, and I hope that he will listen across the House and try and work constructively. It's in that spirit, Madam Deputy Speaker, that this was an incredible operation and was reliant on the Royal Navy and the Royal Marines. Earlier today, I asked the Procurement Minister about whether the plans in place for the Type 26s, the Type 31s and indeed the Type 83s would remain as outlined. And I really am looking for an answer of yes or no to this, because there are shipyards who are really wondering whether they can keep the current workforce because they're relying on the DIP and it's not there. So may I just ask very directly to the Secretary of State, the plans are in place for ships for the Royal Navy, is that going to remain?
Secretary of State.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm genuinely grateful to the right honourable gentleman, because for many, many years he has spoken with real authority on these matters. I hope that he understands that at this particular moment, as we seek to ensure that the DIP does precisely what all of us, I think, want it to do, I'm not going to delve into the specifics of precisely what might be contained with it. But I hope that he will understand that this government is very clear that we will always back British shipbuilding.
Clive Betts.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Could I congratulate my right honourable friend on his appointment and say I'm sure he's very well suited for the job that's at hand. But I'm sure he will understand if I also express my disappointment that his predecessor and my constituent neighbour felt he had to resign because of inadequacy he saw it in the Defence Investment Plan. Could I say on this particular issue about the season of this tanker, Could I again congratulate everyone involved? It's an important lesson, I think, to Putin that we are going to disrupt his war machine, but it's the first. Could he indicate this is something now we're looking to do more regularly to make sure that the many tankers that sail in these waters are in future not free to do so without the fear that our government may act against them?
Secretary of State.
Well, I'm very grateful to my honourable friend, and I absolutely share the sentiment that he expressed at the beginning of his question. I was anticipating that he might seek to draw reference to the hugely important industrial activity that takes place in and around his constituency in South Yorkshire. This department, this government believes very strongly that defence is an engine for growth, and I'm acutely aware of the economic opportunities that exist in his part of the world. He's right to reference the fact that this is the first type of activity of its kind. It will sow the seeds of doubt in our adversary's mind. I know that he will understand that I'm not going to speculate about what we might do in future, but the simple act of the Prime Minister's commitment back in March has had a very significant deterrent effect, as will the activities of yesterday morning.
Richard Tice.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and we welcome the Secretary of State to his place and pay tribute and give our thanks to our incredible armed forces in the successful seizure of the Shadow tanker. It was nice to see the Chancellor alongside the Secretary of State for the first half of this statement. Shall we take from her departure that she's only half committed to funding the investment plan?
Secretary of State.
The honourable gentleman, I have to say, is a constant source of disappointment to me. Not least because I believe he has the potential to be the statesperson of his party. It's
a very low threshold.
It would be very mean of me to say that it is a low bar, so I won't say that. But the honourable gentleman, I think is unfair on my right honourable friend. I think it's important that the Chancellor took the opportunity to be here. That was a demonstration of her commitment to this particular important piece of work. And I, for one, am very grateful for that.
Sarah Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. While our brave servicemen and women were defending our national interests over the weekend, today it's been reported in the BBC that Russian state operatives were linked with arson attacks on our Prime Minister.
Yeah.
And just last week, Stephen Yaxley-Lennon was meeting with Errol Musk in Russia. Shameful. While the member for Great Yarmouth has said he would not block that same individual from joining his party. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that there is no greater threat to our national security, nor anything more unpatriotic than this dangerous rise in far-right politics across our country?
Secretary of State.
Well, I completely agree with my honourable friend. I think she makes a very important point. She referenced the abhorrent attacks that we've seen in recent times. I know that she won't expect me to get into the detail of all of that. But what I can say is, and I saw this very clearly in my previous role, that our counter-terrorism police, our operational partners in the security services, are extraordinarily dedicated in the work that we do. All of that is done in the shadows. We should be very grateful for their efforts. And I give her and the House an assurance that we take the threat that she describes incredibly seriously, and we will make sure that we always guard against it.
Sir John Whittingdale.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I congratulate the Right Honourable Gentleman on his appointment and welcome the action in the Channel. However, he'll also be aware that last night saw one of the biggest attacks yet on civilian buildings and people in Kyiv, and included the damage to the historic cathedral there. He'll also be aware that dual-use technology is still going via third countries and arriving in Russia. And we heard today from a Russian speaker about washing machine microcircuits which were supposedly going to Kazakhstan being found in Russian missiles falling on Kyiv. Can he look again with his colleagues at what further action we can take to stop this technology being used to kill more people in Ukraine?
Secretary of State.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Right Honourable Gentleman is absolutely right to draw attention to the horror of the continued attacks that we're seeing on civilians in Ukraine. It is beyond abhorrent. And we must continue to remind ourselves of the totally reckless nature of Putin's illegal war. And that's why, as a government, we have an absolute responsibility to use all means at our disposal to make it as practically difficult for Russia as we possibly can. I'm extremely grateful to the efforts of the ministers who are sat alongside me in the work that they do to combat that particular threat. I know that they all take it incredibly seriously, and I look forward to working very closely with them in that endeavour.
Chris Webb.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I warmly welcome the Secretary of State to his place. I know he's a man of integrity and decency. I've gladly known him for over 15 years, and I really wish him the best of luck in his new role. I also join him in paying tribute to the men and women who organised and conducted this operation. They are the best of the best, the bravest of the brave, and we all thank them across this House and beyond. But international cooperation is also hugely important in tackling the Russian shadow fleet. So can the Secretary of State confirm that we are working closely with our allies to take every opportunity to degrade their war effort?
Yeah.
Well, I'm very grateful to my honourable friend, who I have known for a very, very long time. I know that he proudly represents a constituency with a long track record of sending young men and women off to serve in our armed forces, and he is a great champion of them and all of those who serve. He's completely right to raise the important point about international cooperation. I've spent much of the weekend talking with allies, and I will be heading to Brussels on Wednesday in order to co-chair the Ukraine contact group with my German counterpart. I also know that my Foreign Office colleague who's joined me on the front bench works tirelessly on these matters to make sure that we collaborate as closely with our international partners to tighten the screw on Russia.
Brendan O'Hara.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and I congratulate the Right Honourable Gentleman on his appointment, and I too pay credit to the Royal Marines on a job well done, and of course welcome anything that helps our allies in Ukraine fighting for their freedom. Of course, decisive action against the Russian shadow fleet could and should have been taken much earlier, and I don't think I'm being overly cynical in suggesting there may be a link between the Prime Minister finally sanctioning this operation and the disintegration that we witnessed at the MOD last week. Given that disintegration was entirely due to the failure of the Treasury to adequately fund our conventional forces, does he share my fear that the seizing of unarmed merchant shipping could soon become the limit of the Royal Navy's surface capability?
Secretary of State.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, let me join with him in paying warm tribute to the Royal Marines. I should probably confess that I haven't spent all of my adult life paying tribute to the Royal Marines, but I'm very proud to be able to do so now. In terms of his second point, let me just say to him, there is no link.
Laura Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I will join all honourable members and the Secretary of State in paying tribute to the Royal Marines, as we are very proud to host the Royal Marine Reserves in my constituency. I welcome the Secretary of State to his place, and I really welcome his assurance that we have not missed a beat in our support for Ukraine. I've been to Ukraine with many honourable members in the chamber tonight, and we know how much the bombs of last night and the attacks of last night on Kyiv will have frightened the people of Ukraine, but how steadfastly supportive they remain. And these deeds are more important than any words that we can say. Can I please urge the Secretary of State and his Cabinet colleagues to maintain this posture, to keep up the action and exploit future opportunities to continue to degrade Putin's war machine so that this illegal war in Ukraine will come to an end?
Well, I'm very grateful to her on both counts, not least because initially she raised the Royal Marine Reserves. And I think it's very important that we pay tribute to all of those who serve in the reserves. I'm constantly inspired by those who are able to balance civilian life, family life and service life, and we owe them a huge debt of gratitude. In terms of her substantive point, I absolutely give her the assurances that she seeks. That is why, as I say, I've spent much of the weekend talking to allies, and that's why on Thursday I will be in Brussels to co-chair the next meeting of the Ukraine Defence Contract Group, so that working with our partners we can make sure that Ukraine's forces get the support that they need to fight Putin's war machine.
Alicia Kearns.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I welcome the honourable and gallant member to his place and thank the Royal Marines, Navy and National Crime Agency for their work over this weekend. It is very important, but we do need to see more initiatives on this basis. But can the Secretary of State give a very specific cost to the House for the cost of maintaining and ultimately decommissioning this ship? Because the Secretary of State wasn't willing to tell us whether or not the seized oil will pay for that. And this will run into the millions, so the Minister will know the exact costs so that the House can work out where that funding is going to come from.
Well, I'm grateful to her and genuinely sorry that she won't be shadowing me anymore. But I know that she will continue to provide constructive contributions in the way that she has. The figure that she seeks doesn't sit within my department. It will sit within, I think, the Department for Transport. I'll correct the record if I've got that wrong. But I hope she understands that there's been very close collaboration across government with different government departments. There was a huge amount of planning that went into launching this operation. It was a truly joined-up approach across government with important contributions made by the Department for Transport, but also the Department of DBT as well.
Chris Bloor.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I congratulate my honourable and gallant friend on his new role. In and out of uniform, he has dedicated his life to this country and we're grateful to sit behind him. Can I also pay tribute to the brave men and women that executed the operation over the weekend with the utmost skill. It's clear the operation of the weekend required multiple stakeholders and international cooperation to deliver an excellent result. On that international cooperation, can I ask the new Secretary of State if this is the start of a more aggressive attitude to that shadow fleet in British waters that is conducting an illegal trade to fund an illegal war?
Secretary of State.
Well, I'm grateful to him, and again, he's right to highlight the importance of international cooperation. I think robust action is the word that I would use. I think that the stakes of the war in Ukraine are so high that we absolutely owe it not just to the people of Ukraine, but to the people in this country to make sure that we are using robust action in the way that we saw yesterday. He's right also to make the point about the amount of preparation and the planning that goes into these activities. It was an absolute privilege to be very closely sighted on the deployment of our troops over the course of this weekend. They performed a very difficult and complex task in an exemplary way. And he, like all of us, I know, are very proud of them.
Victoria Collins.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Standing up to Russia, standing shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine, supporting our military also depends on our military infrastructure and our defence manufacturing. And yet today, a roundtable of advanced manufacturers and across the whole supply chain were raising very loud alarm bells about the impact of steel tariffs, especially on category 14 and 17, with the looming deadline of the 1st of July. So would the Minister speak with his colleagues, I see, especially from the Department of Business and Trade, to ensure that actually these tariffs don't have an inadvertent impact on our defence capabilities, especially at such an important time?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I think the Honourable Lady raises a very important point. I've already taken the opportunity to engage with colleagues in industry, and my honourable friend from the Department for Business and Trade said that he'd be very happy to meet with the Honourable Lady.
Holly Billington.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My constituency, East Thanet, is a maritime community, particularly in Ramsgate, and the awareness of the importance of safety and security at sea resonates across our community. This ship appears to have been operating under the flag of Cameroon, a flag of convenience that is used by shadow fleets to avoid being properly policed. What efforts are being made by the UK government, either independently or with its allies, or through international channels, to deter flagging states from offering stateless ships the cover of apparent respectability and lawfulness?
Secretary of State.
Well, I'm grateful to her, and she's absolutely right to raise the point about the importance of safety and security of those at sea. She made an important point with regard to a flag of convenience. I know that she will understand that because of the ongoing investigation, I can't get into the specifics of this particular case. But my honourable friend from the Foreign Office has just given me assurance that we are working very closely with our allies on the particular point that she's raised.
I welcome the new Defence Secretary on his battlefield promotion. He'll remember from his time in command that the best way to prove himself to his new team is to take them out tomorrow morning and thrash them at Fizz. So I look forward to that. On on the question of the dip, it was widely reported last week that the funding settlement was 10 billion of cash plus 3.5 billion, which I assume was the in-year cuts that were announced back in April. Yep. What confidence does the Defence Secretary have that in the next 2 weeks that he's been given as a stay of execution, that he'll be able to make that plan work more to a better standard than the previous Defence Secretary could in the previous 9 months and ended up resigning over? And what will happen if the Defence Chiefs dig their heels in? Will he end up publishing the dip as it was before he took over, or can he guarantee that he will manage to change this sufficiently that it will satisfy all the parties involved?
Secretary of State.
Well, I'm grateful to him for his welcome, which felt a little bit different from some of the comments that I heard reported over the course of the weekend. But I will leave that to one side for now, not least because I think he's extended an invitation to go out for a run in the morning. He seems to be backtracking for that invitation, Madam Deputy Speaker. I understand why the Honourable Gentleman raises the point in the way that he does. I hope that he will understand my determination to make progress. I know that he will understand that I have had a limited amount of time available to get into the detail of all of this. That is my absolute priority. That is what I will be returning to the department to do very shortly. I hope he'll just give us a little bit of time, and in the end it'll be for him to take a view about where we get to with this.
Mark Seward.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I genuinely welcome the Secretary of State to his place? And can I also commend the Royal Marines, the National Crime Agency, the personnel from the RAF and all the others for conducting their work this weekend. Clearly, this isn't the end we will see of the Russian shadow fleet. There are reports that 2 more ships are sailing our way, sanctioned by the US, the EU, Canada, but not by the UK. Now, I am aware that he can't comment on future sanctions, but can he tell us that he'll work extremely closely with our allies on sanctions alignment to close any loopholes that Putin might seek to take advantage of?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm very grateful to my Yorkshire neighbour for his welcome, for the tribute that he's paid to the Royal Marines. But also, I just want to emphasise the support that he offered for the National Crime Agency. I was privileged to work very closely with them over the past 2 years. They do extraordinary work in the shadows, but we should be hugely grateful to them. I give him the assurances that he seeks with regard to the close cooperation with our international allies, joined on the front bench by my colleague from the Foreign Office. I know that he works incredibly hard to ensure that we are best joined up and working most closely with our allies. We take it very seriously. We understand the benefits of doing so.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I welcome the Secretary of State to his position and thank him for his statement, and indeed our brave Royal Marines for undertaking this action. Madam Deputy Speaker, it's been reported in the press that our entire hunter-killer fleet is out of the water, being repaired and maintained. Is this true, and when will these submarines be back on duty defending our seas? Thank you.
I'm very grateful to him for the point that he's raised in the way that he has done it. I think he will understand that I'm not in a position to be able to talk about the availability of submarines and the activity that they undertake. But perhaps in the Right Honourable Gentleman opposite questions, why not? I'm quite certain that he wouldn't have done that when he was in government, and I'm not going to do it either. What I will do is pay tribute to those who serve on submarines for their outstanding service.
Spence.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I welcome my honourable and gallant friend to his new role? I know he's a very humble man, but I want to say what a pleasure it is to work with him and honourable and gallant members from across the House in this place. I also want to pay tribute to all the armed service personnel who took part in yesterday's really important operation. Clearly, sanctions are really important, and sanctions against the Russian war machine are incredibly important in defending our allies in Ukraine. However, sanctions only work if we look to enforce them. So what reassurance can the Secretary of State give me that we will continue to, this government will continue to support that enforcement?
Secretary of State.
I'm very grateful to him. He's slightly thrown me because he isn't in his usual place, but it's good to see him over there. He's right about the importance of sanctions, but he's also right about the importance of sanctions enforcement. I know it is an issue that my honourable friend, the Minister from the Foreign Office, takes very seriously. They're kept under very close review, as with other colleagues across government, including with DBT, but very happy to speak to him more about it.
Peter Fortune.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's good to see the member for Harlow moving to his right. Can I also pay tribute to members of the armed forces community who played a big part in this operation? They truly are the best of us. Madam Deputy Speaker, I wonder if the Secretary of State could advise us on any actions that are being taken on the Russian frigate, the Admiral Grigorovich, I hope I got that right, which has been patrolling in English waters for 2 months without intervention from the Royal Navy.
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful to him for the point that he's raised. I know that he will understand that it would be unwise of me to get into commentary with regard to specific activities. But what I hope yesterday's actions demonstrate is our absolute resolve to take robust action against Russia. And we will look for every opportunity to do that.
John Slinger.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome my right honourable and gallant friend to his place and his new position. Given that nearly 3 times as many Conservative honourable members were in the Defence Industrial Plan statement as are in the Chamber for this statement, would he agree with me that while of course we're all tempted on occasion to politicise issues, we are better when we speak with one voice in this House, particularly on matters of national security?
Secretary of State.
Well, I think the honourable member does raise an important point. I completely understand why members opposite and members elsewhere will want to score political points. I think the public expect us to behave in a grown-up fashion, particularly when it comes to the defence of our nation. That will always be my approach, and that is the approach that I will recommend to others.
Tessa Munt.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Welcome the Defence Secretary to his position, and thank you for his statement. Sanctions are ineffective unless they're fully enforced, and I join my colleague on the Lib Dem spokesperson just to point out, of course, that we cannot allow loopholes to undermine our sanctions regime against Putin's war machine. I point out the numerous shell companies that are used as a shield, as well as flags, to disguise operational control of its shadow fleet, but also Russia's using extensively non-military dual-use manufacturing and the global commercial supply chain to support its war. So can I ask, what action is the Secretary of State taking to prevent Russia from using dual-use manufacturing, to boost the UK's manufacturing expertise so it can identify potential dual use, and to prevent commercial supply infrastructure to support its war, and to ensure that sanctions are fully enforced?
Secretary of State.
Well, the Honourable Lady is right to raise the importance of defence manufacturing, and she raised a number of other important points as well, not least around unpacking transparency and shell companies. My ministerial colleagues on both sides of me, from the Foreign Office and from DBT, were listening intently to the points that she raised and were providing me with assurances that there is a lot of activity in their departments to stand against the kind of points that she raised. She's indicating that she wants somebody to write to her, and we'll work out which one of us is going to do so.
Across the chamber. Can I thank the Secretary of State for his statement this afternoon?
Point of order, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Point of order, David Reid.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In the earlier urgent question on the Defence Investment Plan, the Minister for Defence Readiness and Industry said that the government are committed to all 62 recommendations laid out in the Strategic Defence Review. And in a later response to a Right Honourable member, the Minister described those recommendations only as ones the government supports. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, as you all know, the word committed carries specific financial meaning in our civil service. So can the Minister use this opportunity to clarify the government's position? And if not, can you, Madam Deputy Speaker, advise me how to get an appropriate answer?
I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for notice of his point of order, and I understand that he also notified the Minister that he intended to raise it. As he will know, this is not a matter for the Chair, but I'm sure that the front bench has heard him, and if the Minister wished to respond, he could, of course, do so through a further point of order. Point of order, Luke Pollard.
Thank you. I'm grateful for my Devon neighbour for allowing me to say again, we back all 62 recommendations of the Strategic Defence Review. We are implementing all 62 recommendations in the Strategic Defence Review. It's an important, first of its kind review, and it's one that this government fully backs.
Motion number 1 on business of the House today. Minister to move.
I beg to move.
The question is as on the order paper. The question is as on the order paper. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Eve. Eve.
Royal Albert Hall Bill, Lords. Revival.
Now. Sir John Whittingdale.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I am pleased to support the revival motion being tabled this afternoon. It is about 8 months since I moved the second reading of the bill. No, I'm sorry, it's about 11 months since I moved the second reading of the bill last year. The bill at that stage had already completed its passage through the House of Lords, and it was given a second reading without opposition. It then went into the Committee on Unopposed Private Bills, and the panel met in March of this year under the chairmanship of the Chairman of Ways and Means, and the committee approved the bill, subject to an undertaking given by the Royal Albert Hall, which I will come back to. Now, I don't want to repeat all of my speech that I made at second reading, but I do want to set out once again why the bill is so necessary and is so beneficial, not just to the Royal Albert Hall, but to the many people who enjoy performances there. The Royal Albert Hall is one of our most important cultural institutions. There can be few people in this chamber, indeed in the country, who have not enjoyed performances either live or broadcast from the hall, including obviously the last night of the proms, the Festival of Remembrance, Cirque du Soleil, and indeed tonight, Elvis Costello. I should declare that I served as a trustee of the Royal Albert Hall, appointed by the Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport from 2018 to 2020. I was one of 5 independent trustees, and I also sat on the Conflicts Committee, which is an extremely important part of the management of the hall, to which I will return. As a result of that, I gained a good understanding of the way in which the hall operates, and I saw how the council works to fulfil the charitable purposes of the hall. The hall has operated successfully for 150 years, and to explain why this bill is